Story 1. After I collapsed at work, Dad called me and asked if the $2,500 allowance was enough. What allowance? I said. He went dead silent. Turns out Mom had been sending it to my brother for his modded car and gaming rig. All right, Reddit. I know the title might be messy, but that's what happened. My mom had been stealing my monthly allowance for 6 months to bankroll my brother's lifestyle, while I worked 3 jobs until I collapsed face first into a stack of dirty dishes. Real subtle. I would not recommend. I'm Elias, 24 male, second-year med student at Northwestern in Chicago. Moved here from Phoenix about 18 months ago, chasing the dream of becoming a trauma surgeon like my dad. He works at a major hospital back in Arizona, pulling in good money, and growing up, we lived a comfortable life. Money was never something we worried about. Then, I moved to Chicago, and suddenly I was drowning. My parents covered tuition, which is huge since Northwestern isn't cheap, but everything else was supposedly on me. Rent in a crappy studio apartment in a sketchy neighborhood, food, books, transportation, all of it. And Chicago doesn't mess around with cost of living. So I started hustling, tutoring undergrads who couldn't be bothered to study, working as a line cook at a sports bar 4 nights a week, picking up weekend shifts at a medical supply warehouse. Sometimes I'd work from 6 a.m. to past midnight, catch 4 hours of sleep, then drag myself to an 8 a.m. anatomy lecture. The exhaustion was crushing. I'd fall asleep during classes, wake up with a drool on my notebook, and no idea what I'd missed. My grades were sliding from A's to C's. I was eating maybe 1 real meal a day, filling the gaps with gas station coffee and whatever cheap carbs I could afford. Living the dream, baby. My friends noticed I was falling apart. One of them, Derek, cornered me after class one day and straight up asked if I was okay. I brushed him off, said I was handling it, just needed to grind through the semester. But I wasn't handling anything. I was barely surviving. Meanwhile, my brother Lucas, 23 years old and supposedly enrolled in some business program at USC, was living like a trust fund kid in Los Angeles. I'd see his Instagram posts. New gaming setup with 3 curved monitors and a custom PC that probably cost $5,000. Posting videos of his Dodge Challenger with fresh modifications, carbon fiber hood, custom exhaust, upgraded suspension. Every few weeks there'd be another post showing off some new piece of gear or another upgrade to his car. I wasn't jealous exactly, more confused. How was Lucas affording all that on a student budget while I was eating ketchup packets for lunch? Yeah, he wasn't. I'd asked my mom for help a few times. Just a couple $100 a month to ease the pressure. She'd shut me down every time. Said Dad's hospital had reduced his hours, money was tight, they were barely covering our tuitions. I believed her because why wouldn't I? She's my mom. So I kept grinding. Picked up a 3rd job doing overnight inventory at a pharmacy. That's when things got bad. It was a Tuesday night at the sports bar, middle of dinner rush. We were slammed. Orders backing up, tickets printing faster than we could cook, servers yelling for food. I was working the grill station, flipping burgers with one hand and checking tickets with the other. The kitchen was hot as heck, probably pushing 95 degrees. I'd been there since 4 p.m. after a full day of classes. Before that, I'd worked the warehouse shift from 6 a.m. to noon. I was plating an order when the room started tilting. I tried to grab the counter, but my legs just quit. Next thing I remember is the head chef's face hovering over me, asking if I could hear him. Then paramedics. Then fluorescent hospital lights. The ER doctor told me I'd collapsed from severe exhaustion and acute malnutrition. Said my blood work looked like someone who'd been living in a famine zone. They pumped me full of IV fluids and made me eat a hospital sandwich before they'd let me leave. The bill was $1,200 that I absolutely did not have. My manager at the bar called the next day. Said he'd been the one to call 911 and that he'd also called my parents since I had them listed as my emergency contact. Then he told me to take the next 2 weeks off because I was clearly running myself into the ground, and he didn't need the liability. Great. 2 weeks without income from my highest-paying job. Derek showed up at my apartment that night with groceries and refused to leave until I ate something real. While I was eating the pasta he'd made, he started asking questions about my financial situation. When I explained that I wasn't getting any help from home, he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Dude, your dad's a surgeon. Why aren't they helping you? Mom says money's tight. Tight enough that your brother can afford a custom gaming rig and a modded-out Challenger? And that's when something clicked. Derek pulled up Lucas's Instagram, and we started going through his posts from the past 6 months. The gaming setup, the car mods, the expensive dinners at trendy LA restaurants, the VIP section at clubs, a weekend trip to Vegas with his buddies. Derek did some quick math based on what he could see. Dude, Your brother's burned through at least 30 or 40 grand in the last 6 months. Probably more. Where's he getting that kind of money? I didn't have an answer, but I was darn sure going to find out. Turns out, when you follow the money trail, sometimes it leads straight to your own family robbing you blind. Fun times ahead. I started with Lucas directly. Called him up acting casual, asked how he was affording everything. He got defensive immediately, said it was none of my business, and that mom helped him out sometimes. When I pushed, he hung up on me. Real mature. So I called Dad at work. He was on rounds but called me back during his break, concerned because Mom had told him about my collapse. Are you doing okay, son? Your mother said you fainted at work. Yeah, I'm fine. Just been working a lot. Son, why? Is the monthly $2,500 not enough? I froze. What are you talking about? Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Elias, I've been transferring $2,500 into your account every month since you started school. Your monthly allowance. My stomach dropped. What allowance? Dad, I haven't received anything. Not a single deposit. What the heck do you mean you haven't been receiving it? More silence. Then his voice came back. Different. Cold. I need to go. Don't say anything to your mother yet. I'm flying up this weekend. He hung up, and I sat there in my crappy apartment, doing the math. $2,500 a month for 18 months. That's $45,000. Money that was supposed to keep me fed and housed and focused on school. Money that had just disappeared. I spent the next 3 days digging. Checked my bank account history going back 2 years. Nothing. Not a single deposit from my parents, except for random small amounts here and there that I'd asked for. Derek helped me create a detailed timeline of Lucas's purchases based on his social media. Gaming PC in March, first car mod in April, new exhaust system in May, custom wheels in June, full suspension upgrade in August, a $3,000 gaming chair in September. We screenshot everything, saved it all to Google Drive. Then Derek said something. If your dad's been sending money and you haven't gotten it, that means someone's been intercepting it. That's not just lying, man. That's fraud. That's like a felony. I'd been thinking of this as family drama, favoritism, bad parenting. But Derek was right. This was theft. That Friday, Dad flew into Chicago without telling Mom. Showed up at my apartment at 8 p.m. looking like he'd aged 5 years since I'd last seen him. Show me everything, he said. If you've ever wanted to watch a surgeon methodically dissect a crime scene, let me tell you, it's exactly as intense as it sounds. Dad sat at my tiny kitchen table studying printouts like he was reading x-rays, bank statements showing 0 deposits, screenshots of Lucas's Instagram posts with dates and estimated costs, the timeline Derek and I had built. Your mother handles all our household finances, Dad said quietly. I transfer my paycheck into our joint account, and she manages everything from there. Bills, your tuitions, day-to-day expenses. I trusted her. I've been transferring your living allowance to an account I thought was yours. She set it up, gave me the account number, told me it was linked to your checking account. So, where's the money actually going? We'll find out. Dad spent the night on my couch, and the next morning we went to his bank. He had them pull records for every transfer he'd made to my supposed account. There it was in black and white. $2,500 every month for 18 months, plus an initial deposit of $5,000 when I'd first moved to Chicago. Total, $50,000. 50 grand. My brother had burned through $50,000 of my money on a gaming chair and car parts. The account number didn't match mine, not even close. The banker confirmed the transfers had gone through successfully to the account number on file, but couldn't disclose who actually owned the account without proper legal paperwork, privacy laws or whatever. You'll need a court order, she said. If you suspect fraud, file a police report. We left the bank with printed records of every transfer. Dad called his lawyer from the parking lot. Then we spent the afternoon at the police station. He filed a detailed report. Suspected financial fraud, unauthorized diversion of funds, possible identity theft. The detective said it was straightforward enough and that they'd freeze the account while investigating. A week later, the court order came back. The account was jointly held by Diane Thornton and Lucas Thornton, both with full access. My mother and brother, working together, for 18 months. The frozen account had $11,247 in it. The rest, nearly $40,000, had already been spent. On what, you ask? Gaming equipment and making Lucas's Challenger look like it belonged to a Fast and Furious extra. Money well spent, clearly. Dad stood up fast. He pulled records for every account he shared with Mom. Credit cards, savings, investment accounts, everything. He found more problems immediately. Cash advances from their credit cards totaling another $15,000 over the past year. Withdrawals from their savings that Dad hadn't authorized. She's been siphoning funds from multiple sources, Dad said. This isn't just your living expenses. She's been stealing from our retirement accounts. We ordered food that night and kept working. Dad called a lawyer friend back in Phoenix, explained the situation. The lawyer was blunt. What Mom had done was financial fraud, identity theft, and potentially elder abuse since she'd forged Dad's signature on several withdrawal forms. I want her to know that option's on the table, Dad said. Sunday morning, Dad called Mom and told her we were both flying home to Phoenix that afternoon for a family meeting. She tried to protest. Dad cut her off. This isn't optional, Diane. We'll be there by 6 p.m. Have Lucas there too. Nothing says quality family time like an ambush with legal documents and a side of existential dread. We landed in Phoenix at 5:30 p.m. Lucas's Challenger was in the driveway. Mom opened the door looking nervous. Michael, Elias, this is unexpected. Where's Lucas? Dad's voice was flat. In his room. Michael, what's this about? Get him. Living room. Now. She hurried upstairs and came back with Lucas, who looked annoyed at being interrupted. He had the audacity to be wearing a $200 gaming headset around his neck. We sat. Dad opened his folder and pulled out bank statements. Diane, do you know what account number this is? Mom glanced at the paper, and something flickered across her face. I'm not sure. Why? It's the account you told me was Elias's living expense account. Dad's voice was calm, precise. Except it's not Elias's account, is it? It's a joint account held by you and Lucas. Would you like to explain why Elias's living expenses have been going into Lucas's account instead? Lucas shifted in his seat. Dad continued. $50,000, Diane. Where did it go? Lucas spoke up, trying for casual. Look, Mom said you'd approved. Don't. Dad's voice was sharp. Don't lie to me! He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through screenshots. Custom gaming PC, carbon fiber hood, custom exhaust, suspension upgrade, custom wheels, gaming chair. That's over 20 grand right there, and that's just what he posted publicly. Lucas has needs too, Mom said defensive. He's building a career in business. He needs to present a certain image. He's 23 years old playing video games and modding his car, Dad interrupted. While his brother was working 3 jobs and collapsed from malnutrition. Elias passed out at work, Diane. The ER doctor said he looked like a famine victim. Lucas looked uncomfortable. Mom looked like she was the victim here. Because of course she did. You've always favored Elias, she shot back. Lucas needed support too. So you stole it from Elias? From our retirement accounts? Yes, Diane. I found those withdrawals too. $15,000 in unauthorized cash advances. Another $20,000 from our savings. Dad leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you and I are closing that fraudulent account. Every remaining dollar goes to Elias's actual account. You're being removed from all our joint accounts. And Lucas's access to family money ends today. Completely. You can't do that! Lucas stood up. That's my money! It's money stolen from your brother while he was starving. Sit down. Lucas sat. We're also having a conversation with a lawyer, Dad continued. Because you're looking at serious charges, Diane. Mom's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. The next morning, Dad and I went to the bank while Mom stayed home. The bank manager confirmed what we already knew and explained the account would remain frozen during the fraud investigation. Back at the house, Mom had apparently decided her best defense was a good offense. We walked in to find her on the phone, crying to someone about how Dad was financially abusing her. Dad waited until she hung up. Who was that? My sister. Someone who actually cares about what happens to me. Here's the situation, Dad continued. I've frozen the fraudulent account. I've removed you from our joint checking and savings. You'll have access to one credit card with a $500 monthly limit for essentials. The mortgage is paid. Utilities are handled. You're not being left destitute. But your free access to family money is over. This is controlling behavior. You can't do this. I can and I am. You committed fraud. You stole from our son. Dad pulled out his phone. I have a lawyer on retainer. He's drafting divorce papers. You'll be served within the week. Mom's face crumpled. The tears looked fake. Divorce papers? Michael, have you lost your mind? You're throwing away 25 years of marriage over a misunderstanding? I spoke up. Mom, I collapsed at work because I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. I was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night. My grades were failing. While you were sending my money to Lucas for gaming equipment. That's not a misunderstanding. She turned on me, all pretense gone. You were always fine. You're smart, capable. Lucas needed help. He's not like you, Elias. Lucas is not a kid. He should have been helping himself. The gaming equipment helps him network with people in the business community. He plays Fortnite, Mom. He's not networking with business people. The car modifications are an investment. In business, appearance... Enough, Dad interrupted her. This conversation is over. I'm filing for divorce. Elias is getting every dollar that was stolen from him, with interest. And Lucas's trust distributions are being suspended indefinitely. That got her attention. You can't touch his trust fund. I will not let you. I control distributions until he turns 30. The trust allows me to withhold payments for financial irresponsibility or illegal activity. Lucas has done both. Lucas's trust was worth about $180,000, set up by our grandparents. Mine was the same. Dad couldn't take the principal, but he could absolutely refuse distributions and deduct what Lucas owed from future payouts. You're a monster, Mom hissed. No, Diane. I'm a father protecting his son from his own mother. I stayed in Phoenix for 3 more days, while Dad got everything in order legally. The divorce papers were filed. Lucas tried calling me twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. The first message was angry, saying I was ruining his life by telling Dad lies. The second one was whiny, asking me to fix this because his credit cards weren't working. I flew back to Chicago with $11,247 in my bank account and a promise from Dad that he'd send my living expenses directly from now on. Plus, he'd paid my rent 3 months in advance and dropped $2,000 in my account as an apology. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I quit the warehouse job and cut back my bar shifts to just 2 nights a week. Kept the tutoring because I actually enjoyed it. Suddenly, I had time to study, to sleep, to eat real food. My professors noticed the difference immediately. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. You know what toxic people hate more than consequences? Actually facing those consequences. I should have known Mom and Lucas wouldn't just accept consequences and move on. That's not how toxic people work. They double down. 3 weeks after the confrontation, weird things started happening. Someone tried to access my student account at Northwestern. The IT department caught it because the login attempt came from LA, Lucas's location. They flagged it and locked my account. Then my landlord called saying someone had contacted him, claiming to be from my family, saying I'd been hospitalized and wouldn't be able to pay rent, asking if they could work out a payment plan where they'd take over my lease. My landlord told them to pound sand but gave me a heads up. Derek suggested I check my credit report. Good call. Someone had tried to open a credit card in my name using my social security number. Application was denied because the address didn't match, but the attempt was there, filed in LA, with Lucas's zip code. Dude, your brother's trying to steal your identity, Derek said. This is beyond family drama. I called Dad immediately. He was not surprised. Your mother's been calling me daily trying to negotiate. Says Lucas is having trouble finding work. Yesterday, she threatened to sue me for spousal support. Can she do that? She can try. But given the documented fraud, she won't get far. He paused. Elias, I think they're going to escalate. Watch your back. He was right. 2 days later, Northwestern's financial aid office called me in. The administrator looked uncomfortable. Mr. Thornton, we received a concerning call regarding your enrollment status. We need to verify some information. Can you confirm your current enrollment and that you're not currently hospitalized? I'm not hospitalized. I'm standing right here. What's going on? She hesitated. Someone contacted us claiming to be a family member with information about your status. Based on your verification today, we've noted that the information was inaccurate. We'll be flagging your account to prevent future unauthorized contacts. Mom was trying to sabotage my education. Nothing says good parenting like trying to torpedo your kid's medical school career. I documented everything, kept records of every suspicious contact, every attempted access, every weird call. Derek suggested I file a police report for the identity theft attempt. The Chicago PD took my report and assigned it a case number. Then things went nuclear. I got a call from an unknown number. Female voice, professional. Is this Elias Thornton? I'm calling from Credit Solutions regarding your outstanding debt of $8,400 from... I don't have any outstanding debts. Our records show you opened an account with AutoZone in Los Angeles 3 months ago and haven't made any payments. I've never opened an account with AutoZone. I don't even live in Los Angeles. Someone using my name and SSN had opened a credit account at AutoZone in LA and charged $8,400 worth of car parts. Never made a single payment. The account defaulted and went to collections. $8,000 in car parts. Lucas really went all in on that Challenger. I'm a victim of identity theft, I told her. My brother stole my information. I've already filed a police report. I spent the next 3 hours filing documentation, filed an identity theft report with the FTC, called the Chicago detective, and added the AutoZone fraud to my police report. With both documents, I contacted AutoZone's fraud department. 2 weeks later, they confirmed the account was fraudulent, closed it, and removed all charges from my credit report. The debt was written off, but Lucas had his car parts. I called Dad. Then I called his lawyer. "This is escalating," the lawyer said. "Your brother's committing multiple crimes. Identity theft, credit fraud, attempted fraud on the Northwestern account. Your mother's potentially an accomplice. We need to consider pressing charges." Will that actually work? The evidence is substantial. The AutoZone account alone is a serious crime with clear paper trail. Combined with the previous financial fraud, a prosecutor would love this case. Dad flew to Chicago that weekend with his lawyer, Andrew Lopez. We met in Andrew's downtown office. "Here's the situation," Andrew said, spreading documents across his conference table. "You have multiple federal criminal violations. The evidence is well documented." "What are our options?" Dad asked. "Federal prosecution is viable. What I recommend is a deferred prosecution agreement. We present all the evidence to the prosecutor. They agree the case is solid, but instead of filing charges immediately, they hold them over the defendants' heads. We set up conditions, paying back all the money, no contact orders, counseling. If they comply, the charges stay pending but unfiled. If they violate even once, the prosecutor files immediately. Is that enforceable?" I asked. "Absolutely. Prosecutors use these all the time for fraud cases. It clears their caseload, victims get made whole, and they keep the hammer hanging. Your mother and brother would have to sign and the prosecutor approves it. Any violation means charges get filed and they proceed to trial." Dad nodded. "That gives us leverage." "Exactly. Time to turn those family photos into evidence exhibits. Thanksgiving's going to be weird this year." Andrew didn't mess around. Within a week, he'd compiled everything needed to show prosecutors this was solid. The complaint listed 4 main charges: identity theft for using my information, wire fraud for the electronic transfer scheme, credit card fraud for the AutoZone account, and conspiracy. Andrew explained, "If prosecuted and convicted, Lucas is looking at potentially 2 to 5 years on the identity theft alone. Your mother would likely face lighter sentencing as an accomplice, maybe probation or up to 2 years. But we're not going for prosecution. We're going for compliance." He pulled out the draft agreement. 20 pages long, single-spaced, dense legal language. "I've already reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office with an overview. They're interested. We present the full criminal complaint with all evidence. The prosecutor reviews and agrees prosecution would work. Then, instead of filing, they approve an agreement with specific conditions." Andrew laid out the terms. Full repayment of $78,600, covering stolen living expenses, the AutoZone fraud, unauthorized credit card advances, plus legal fees and interest. Payment plan of $3,000 per month over 26 months. Miss a payment? Charges get filed immediately. Both Lucas and Mom had to sign a court-enforced no-contact agreement for 3 years. Any contact with me, direct or indirect, would trigger immediate filing. Both had to complete court-ordered counseling within 6 months and check in monthly with a court officer. Beautiful. The best part, Andrew continued, is that it's not a plea deal. They're acknowledging the evidence supports prosecution. The charges are approved by the prosecutor and held pending for the entire compliance period. If they complete all terms, charges can be dismissed after 3 to 5 years. But any violation means the prosecutor files immediately. "So, we have leverage for at least 5 years, I said. "Correct." The prosecutor's office took 2 weeks to review everything. They approved the agreement. The assistant prosecutor told Andrew it was a solid case. Andrew sent the package to Mom's divorce attorney with a 72-hour deadline. Sign or the charges get filed. Lucas called me that night. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail, voice shaking. "Elias, come on, man. You're going too far. You really gonna send me to prison? I'm your brother. Yeah, I messed up. But this is insane. Just call me back. Please." I saved the voicemail and sent it to Andrew. Evidence of contact attempt. Mom tried too, through Dad. Called him crying. Dad shut her down. "Lucas is not a kid. And you're 49, Diane. You knew exactly what you were doing. Sign the agreement or face charges. Those are your options." The deadline came and went. No signature. Andrew filed the criminal complaint the next morning. Within hours, Mom's lawyer called, begging for an extension. "Your clients had 72 hours, Andrew said flatly. "They chose not to sign. The complaint is filed. They'll sign. They'll sign today." I can inform the prosecutor that the victims are willing to accept the agreement instead of prosecution. The prosecutor still has to approve it. Mom and Lucas signed that afternoon. The prosecutor approved it with one modification. Counseling had to be completed within 6 months, not 1 year. Both had to check in monthly with a court-appointed officer. Lucas's trust fund, which Dad controlled, was liquidated to make the first $20,000 payment immediately. The rest would come from Mom's share of the divorce settlement and Lucas's income, which meant Lucas actually had to get a job. It was comprehensive and binding for 5 years minimum. It was perfect. Dad and I celebrated that night at a steakhouse in downtown Chicago. You know they're going to resent you for years, Dad said. I can live with that. How are your classes? Better. Way better. Made Dean's List this semester. I'm proud of you, son. We clinked glasses. But I wasn't done yet. Not quite. Turns out there's standing up for yourself, and then there's salting the earth where they stood. Guess which one I picked. The payment agreement was great, but it was just money. What I wanted was consequences. Real, lasting, social consequences. Derek and I were having lunch between classes when I mentioned this. He got this look on his face. What if we go public? Public? How? Social media. Your brother plastered his lifestyle all over Instagram while spending your money. Turn it around on him. I'd thought about it. It felt nuclear. That's pretty scorched earth. So is stealing 50 grand from your brother while he's collapsing from malnutrition. So is committing identity theft. Dude, they went scorched earth first. You're just returning fire. He had a point. I spent a week writing a detailed post. Kept it factual, showed screenshots of Lucas's purchases next to photos of the legal documents, blurred out sensitive info but showing enough to prove it was real. Explained exactly what had happened. I ended it with, this isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Actions have consequences. Posted it on my Instagram. Maybe had like 400 followers. Tagged Lucas. Andrew confirmed this type of factual post about public legal proceedings was protected speech. Within an hour, it had 200 likes and dozens of comments. Someone sent it to a Reddit community about family drama, and it blew up there too. Lucas's friends started commenting on his posts. Bro, you stole from your brother? Wait, that car was bought with stolen money? Lucas's Instagram went private, then disappeared entirely. Watching the internet do its thing was better than any revenge I could have planned myself. Mom's Facebook got hit too. Someone found her page and started sharing my post. Her friends from the country club started asking questions. The comments were mostly deleted, but people screenshot them. Mom called Dad, furious. Tell Elias to take down that post. He's humiliating us. Nah, he's telling the truth. The legal documents are public record. If you're humiliated, maybe you shouldn't have committed fraud. She tried to report my post as harassment. Instagram reviewed it and left it up because everything was factual. The social fallout was better than I could have hoped. Lucas's follower count dropped from like 1,200 to 300 before he deleted everything. Mom got dropped from her book club. One of the women actually called Dad to tell him they'd voted they didn't want someone who'd steal from her own child in their group. But the best part? Lucas had to sell his car. The payments were killing him. He'd gotten a job doing sales at a tech startup making maybe $45,000 a year. After taxes and living expenses, he couldn't afford the Challenger's insurance, maintenance, and still make his portion of the payments. He'd put $40,000 plus into that car between the original purchase and mods. Sold it for $28,000. Derek found the listing and we had a good laugh. Lucas trying to make the car look good in some mall parking lot, describing all the premium upgrades that actually made it less valuable to normal buyers. All those modifications he bought with my stolen money? Depreciation central. Meanwhile, I was thriving. With money no longer an issue, I joined a research lab at Northwestern working on trauma surgery techniques. Got myself a better apartment. Actually had a bedroom separate from the living space. Started going out with friends, having a social life. Felt like I could finally breathe. Made friends with one of my professors, Dr. Sarah, who'd noticed my grades improving. She offered me a position in her research team, studying emergency response protocols. Paid position, flexible hours, great for my resume. I accepted immediately. 6 months after the agreement was signed, I was doing better than ever. Dean's List 2 semesters in a row. Published name on a research paper, money and savings, social life, actual sleep schedule. Lucas, according to Dad's reports, was miserable. Working a job he hated. Most of his paycheck going to payments, no car, no social life. Living with roommates in a crappy LA apartment. Actually had to take public transit. The court officer confirmed they were both attending mandatory counseling. 2 years after the collapse that started everything, my life looks nothing like it did before. Third year of med school now, top 10% of my class, working in Dr. Sarah's research lab, published 2 papers with another one submitted, already getting recruitment interest from hospitals for residency positions. Dad's doing great too. Divorce finalized. Mom got way less than she expected after the court factored in her fraud. She's living in a small condo, still working at a real estate office, still making payments. Has like 4 months left on her payment plan. Lucas's situation is less clear because Dad doesn't talk about him much, and I obviously can't contact him. Last I heard, he'd moved back to Phoenix after losing his LA job, was working retail. Still making payments, still in counseling, still under the agreement. He tried to reach out through Dad once, asking if we could put this behind us. I said no through Andrew. The no contact provision stands for the full 3-year term. The post I made is still up on my Instagram. Every few months someone new finds it and shares it. Got like 3,000 likes now. Among our circle, Lucas's name is permanently attached to the guy who stole from his brother. Mom's reputation in Scottsdale never recovered. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Then I remember working 3 jobs, eating once a day, collapsing at work. Remember the hospital bill. Remember the panic of falling behind in school. Remember calling my mom begging for help while she sent my money to Lucas for gaming equipment? Nah, they got exactly what they deserved. Derek's still my best friend. We're planning to apply to the same residency programs. He jokes that I should write a book about all this. Dr. Sarah asked me to co-present our research at a conference next month. It's in Phoenix, ironically. Dad's coming to watch. I asked if he'd heard from Mom about it. He said she'd asked if she could attend. What did you tell her? That it was your decision, not mine. I thought about it for about 3 seconds. No, she doesn't get to show up now and pretend she's proud. She lost that right when she stole from me. Dad nodded. That's what I figured. Part of me wonders if I should feel bad about cutting them off so completely. But I don't. Some people are toxic. Some people will never admit they were wrong. Me? I'm the guy who caught them stealing and made sure there were consequences. The guy who's going to be a trauma surgeon and save lives while they're still paying off what they owe. The Phoenix conference was the next month. I flew in 2 days early to prep and spend time with Dad. The presentation went perfect. Standing ovation, multiple hospital reps asking for my contact info, Dr. Sarah beaming. Afterwards, Dad wanted to take me to dinner. I was in the hotel lobby waiting for my Uber when I heard it. Elias? I turned. Lucas was standing there wearing an IKEA uniform polo, blue and yellow, name tag and everything. He looked different. The cocky golden child energy was just gone. What are you doing here? I work nearby. Saw you walk in earlier. Been waiting to see if you'd come back out. He took a step closer. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes? I should have walked away. The no contact order was technically still in effect for another year, but I was curious. You've got 3 minutes, and we're staying right here. Lucas nodded, looking relieved. Look, I know I messed up. I know what I did was wrong. Mom's been in therapy, and she's been telling me I need to take accountability. Lucas, cut the therapy speak nonsense. What do you actually want? He flinched. I wanted to apologize. For real. Not because the court made me. I was a selfish jerk, and I spent your money on stupid stuff while you were struggling. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Apology noted. I checked my phone. You've got 2 minutes left. That's it? I'm trying to make things right here. You want to make things right? Finish your payments. Keep seeing your therapist. Don't contact me again until the agreement expires. I looked at his uniform. How's IKEA treating you? His jaw tightened. It's a job. Yeah, it is. An honest one, too. First time for everything. Geez, Elias, you really hate me that much? I don't hate you, Lucas. I don't really feel anything about you anymore. You're just the guy who stole from me and faced consequences. I saw my Uber pulling up. But since you wanted to talk, let me ask you something. Was it worth it? Was what worth it? The gaming PC, the car mods, the Vegas trips. All of it. Was it worth losing your trust fund? Your car? Your reputation? Was it worth making minimum wage at IKEA while I'm getting recruited by Johns Hopkins? His face went red. You're really gonna throw that in my face? You asked for 5 minutes. I'm giving you honesty. My phone buzzed. Uber was waiting. Here's the thing you never got. You thought you were special. The golden child. Rules didn't apply. Mom convinced you that you deserved everything, and I was just the boring one who'd figure it out. But you weren't special. You were just enabled. I know that now. Cool. Glad therapy's working. I headed for the door. He called after me. Seriously? That's it? Yup, that's it. Have a good life, brother. Don't try to contact me again. I walked out to the Uber while he stood there in silence. He didn't try to contact me or Dad after that. Some bridges should stay burned. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Story 2. No deadbeats allowed at Christmas this year, so we're only having your sister and her family, my dad sneered. 2 weeks later, the deadbeat they disowned hosted everyone at his $8 million mountain lodge. Guess whose Christmas got ruined? Hey Reddit, so I, Silas, 35 male, never thought I'd be the type to post here. But let's just say, last Christmas flipped my whole life upside down, in the best way possible. I'm not here to brag or cry for sympathy, just to tell you what happens when the invisible kid finally stops waiting for an invite and builds his own table instead. Buckle up, it gets interesting. My phone buzzed just after sunrise, the screen lighting up with my dad's name. We're keeping Christmas small. No deadbeats this year, so it'll only be your sister and her family. I stared at it for a second, reread it twice, then typed back, got it. Enjoy yourselves. Short, polite, civilized. The kind of reply that says I don't care when, in reality, it hits like a slow punch to the ribs. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and let the silence sit there. Same pattern, different year. Marcy and her picture-perfect life, the family star since day one, and me, the side character they kept forgetting was in the scene. The first time it hit me, I was 13. I'd just won a regional robotics contest. Built a machine that could move blocks by voice command. Basic, but for a teenager in a garage, it was a miracle. I came running into the living room, certificate in one hand, grease still on my fingers, heart pounding like I'd cracked the code to NASA. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. That's nice, Silas. Marcy's solo went great last night. Her teacher said she might audition for Juilliard someday. Mom gasped like he'd announced world peace. Oh, we have to record it for her portfolio. My certificate ended up under a pile of bills on the counter, where it stayed until I eventually threw it out myself. Then there was the drone. I built it from scratch using parts from old RC toys, programmed it to hover, and respond to basic commands. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would finally impress them. I called Mom out to the yard. She watched it lift off, blinked once, said, "Neat, Silas." Then, without missing a beat, added, "Oh, Marcy's debate team made nationals. We're flying out to see her." That one stung. Not because I wanted praise, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Marcy could sneeze and they'd write it in the family newsletter. I could invent teleportation and they'd ask me to keep it down while she practiced her scales. But the one that burned itself into my brain came a little later. I was in the garage, testing another one of my ridiculous projects, as Dad liked to call them. A small wheeled robot that could follow light signals. I had cables all over the floor, half a dozen LEDs blinking in different colors. Marcy came in, scrolling through her phone, wearing one of those oversized scarves she loved. I told her to watch out. She didn't even look down, just walked straight across and tripped over a wire. Next thing I knew, she was screaming, holding her ankle. Dad came running like I'd shot her. "What the hell, Silas?" he yelled. I told her to watch her step. You could have killed her. Look at this mess. Cords everywhere. Tools on the floor. Mom appeared next, dramatic as ever. "We're taking her to urgent care. You are done with this nonsense. Do you understand me?" "It was an accident," I tried to say. Didn't matter. They were already in the car. That night, Dad walked into my room with a cardboard box. "Hand it over." I looked at him, confused. "What? Your stuff? All of it. Tools, gadgets, wires. You can embarrass yourself all you want outside this house, but you stay away from your sister." He left with my equipment like it was contraband. They cut my allowance after that, too. Said maybe it'd teach me some responsibility. Marcy got a new pair of designer boots 2 days later to make her feel better. After that, I stopped building for a while. Every time I tried to start something new, I'd hear Dad's voice in my head. "You can embarrass yourself all you want." So I stopped risking embarrassment. I studied quietly, kept my ideas to myself, learned early that curiosity came with a punishment fee. Years later, when I finally got into Caltech, I thought that would change everything. It didn't. They congratulated me like I'd won a raffle. Marcy was getting ready for another choir performance, and Mom said, "We'll visit when things calm down." They never did. I picked up the phone again, stared at my reply. That's how I survived their version of family love. Act like it doesn't hurt, and eventually, maybe it won't. I smirked to myself, the kind of smirk that hides years of quiet resentment. "Merry Christmas, Marcy," I muttered. "Hope your spotlight's bright enough for the both of us." You teenage years were rough, it felt like. Me trying to build something while my family acted like I was putting together junk. When I got into Caltech, I thought that would finally flip the script. Like maybe they'd say, "Wow, Silas, that's insane, we're proud of you." Nope. Dad just said, "That's far from home, huh? You sure about all this computer stuff?" Mom added, "Your sister's law school graduation is the same week. We'll have to see about visiting." They never did. Meanwhile, Marcy sent a text. "Congrats, bro. Guess you'll be a hacker or something now?" LOL. That was it. College was brutal. Everyone around me had backup plans, connections, parents who actually cared. My backup plan was canned soup. I'd call home sometimes, but most of the time they were busy with Marcy's events. Debate nationals, a new promotion, planning her engagement party. My mom talked more about the flowers than my finals. Then came the wedding. That circus. 300 people, a string quartet, chandeliers so bright you could see your reflection in them. Marcy's fiancé, Anthony, was one of those guys who wears cufflinks at breakfast. He barely looked at me. I thought maybe I'd at least get to stand next to her as a groomsman, you know, brother and all. But nope. Anthony had his frat brothers, his cousins, even his high school lacrosse coach. I got handed a flashlight. Dad said, "You're good with wires. Make yourself useful. Help the lighting guy." So I did. I spent most of the night crawling under tables and checking outlets while Marcy floated around in her dress like she was royalty. Every few minutes, someone would say, "You must be so proud," and my parents would smile like they were the ones getting married. When she gave her speech, Mom cried. Dad took videos from every angle. When I said goodbye that night, they were already talking about honeymoon destinations with Anthony's parents. I doubt they even noticed me leaving. The only person who bothered to talk to me for real was Uncle Ray, Dad's younger brother. He's the opposite of my parents. Quiet, sarcastic in a funny way, actually listens when you talk. He pulled me aside after the ceremony, handed me a beer. I didn't even want it, but I appreciated the gesture, and said, "Don't take it personally, kid. They've always been like this. You're not the problem. They just think loud equals successful." It wasn't much, but it stuck. He talked to me like I was a person, not a background prop in the Marcy show. After that, I kept my distance. Holidays, birthdays, whatever, they blended together. The calls became shorter. I still sent them updates, but it was mostly silence on their end. I learned that if I didn't bring up Marcy, the conversation died within a minute. One Thanksgiving, during my junior year, I was short on cash. I'd been working part-time fixing computers in the dorms, but rent had just eaten my last paycheck. Flights were expensive, so I swallowed my pride and called home. "Hey, flights are high this year. You think you could help me out a bit so I can come home for Thanksgiving?" Mom went quiet. Then Dad got on the line. "Don't worry about it, Silas. Whether you come or not won't make much difference. We'll see you at Christmas, maybe." They said it like they were doing me a favor, saving me the trouble. I just sat there on my dorm bed, holding the phone like an idiot. "Right," I said finally. "Yeah, sure. Makes sense." When Thanksgiving came, the dorms were almost empty. Just me, one international student down the hall, and the sound of the vending machine humming in the lounge. I bought microwave noodles from the campus store and ate them in front of my laptop. I scrolled through Facebook. There they were. Mom, Dad, Marcy, Anthony, and their fancy table setup. Matching sweaters, golden turkey, some caption like "family is everything." I laughed out loud. Not the funny kind. The kind you do when your chest feels tight and you don't know what else to do. It wasn't like I expected much. But the realization hit harder than I thought. I wasn't just forgotten. I was optional. Like a side feature they could enable or disable, depending on the season. Later that night, I opened one of my project files, messed around with some code, and told myself I'd make something big one day. Not to show them, just to know I could. Because sitting there with that cheap instant ramen, watching my family as everything parents pose for photos without even noticing the missing seat at the table, that's when it clicked. I wasn't invisible by accident. They wanted it that way. After Caltech, I moved to Chicago with one suitcase, a laptop that shuts down if it wasn't on the charger, and an offer letter that paid less than what Marcy probably spent on a haircut. The company was a small cybersecurity firm downtown. They liked to call it fast-paced, which really meant you'll live here and forget weekends exist. The work itself wasn't bad. I handled firewall systems, network patches, boring but essential stuff. I was the guy people called when something broke, and somehow, it always broke. I pulled all-nighters fixing servers while my manager took credit for the reports. When bonuses came around, he got one. I gotta keep it up. After 3 years of grinding, showing up early, staying late, learning every system inside out, I finally realized the math didn't add up. Every paycheck felt like an insult. So in 2016, I quit. I remember sitting in my one-bedroom apartment, looking at my resignation email and thinking, well, here goes nothing. I started my own company, Centria, out of my living room. I had one desk, a coffee machine that sounded like it was dying, and the kind of drive that makes you a little stupid. The first few months were chaos. I'd meet clients in coffee shops, sometimes in hotel lobbies because I didn't have an office. I built security systems for small businesses, mom and pop shops, clinics, startups. I was coding 14 hours a day, barely eating, trying to look like I wasn't running this thing solo. For a while, it worked. Money trickled in. I even started thinking maybe this could be the start of something big. Then, one contract went sideways. A client claimed my security update broke their payment system. They stopped paying and threatened to sue. That one client snowballed into 3 others demanding refunds I couldn't afford. My bills stacked up, my rent was late, and just like that, I went from young entrepreneur to guy who might lose his laptop to collections. I called my parents. Mistake number 1. Mom answered, her voice dripping with fake concern. Silas, you really should have thought this through. Businesses are risky, you know. Yeah, thanks, Mom. I figured that out, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. I just need a small loan. I'll pay it back in a few months. Dad got on the line. Why don't you just get a real job? Marcy's firm is doing great. She stuck to something stable. I rubbed my temple. I didn't ask for career advice, Dad. Just a short-term loan. You made your choices, he said. Time to live with them. That was the end of that. So I called Marcy. She was a lawyer by then, or at least she liked to remind people she was. I figured maybe she'd point me in the right direction. She answered on the second ring. Loud office noise in the background. Silas, hey, what's up? Need legal help? Yeah, kinda. I'm getting hit with a breach of contract claim from a client. I just need... She cut me off laughing. Wow, already getting sued? Didn't take long, huh? Yeah, hilarious, I said flatly. Can you help or not? Not, she said. Also, don't call me for this stuff. I have actual clients. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a solid minute, fighting the urge to throw it. A week later, I got a letter from a collection agency and a warning from my landlord. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by empty coffee cups and printed contracts, thinking maybe I really had messed up my entire life. I had one number left to try, Uncle Ray. He answered on the second ring. Silas boy, what's wrong? You sound like you swallowed a battery. I screwed up, Ray, I said. Company's tanking. I'm broke. I've got a client threatening to sue me, and my parents think I'm a walking punchline. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, You're not screwed. You're just early. Everyone crashes before they figure out how to land. I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't used to someone not rubbing it in. He asked for the details. Every line of the contract, every stupid mistake I made. Then he told me, I've got a buddy who's a lawyer. Old school, cheap, but good. I'll have him call you. And Silas's? Yeah. Don't give up. You've got brains, kid. You just need better people around you. I'll wire you something to keep the lights on. I almost told him not to, but when you're living off vending machine snacks, pride doesn't pay rent. The money hit my account the next morning. Enough to breathe. The lawyer handled the claim, got the case settled quietly. When I called to thank Ray, he said, Now that that's handled, stop wasting time feeling sorry for yourself. I've got a few connections who might actually appreciate what you can do. Let me make a few calls. For the first time in years, someone wasn't telling me I was a disappointment. Over the next 6 months, I rebuilt what was left of my life, sold off my old hardware, closed down Centria officially, and started helping one of Ray's contacts with small security jobs on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Every time I'd send him a progress update, Ray would reply with something like, Told you, kid. Just keep grinding. You're not done yet. And for the first time since I was a kid holding that stupid robotics certificate, I actually believed it. By the next year, Ray's connections helped me land a director-level job at a mid-sized security firm on the edge of downtown Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. I managed a small team, handled client systems, and learned how real business worked. Not just the code, but the ugly side. Budgets, contracts, clients who wanted the impossible yesterday. I worked like a man possessed. First in, last out, living on caffeine and takeout. Every time something went wrong, I fixed it. Every time someone else froze, I stepped in. Within a year, my boss was calling me the cleanup guy. I didn't mind. Cleaning up other people's messes paid better than making my own. But I started to notice something. The higher-ups weren't half as smart as they thought. They spent meetings arguing about color schemes while I was patching real security holes. They sold expensive solutions that barely worked, then congratulated themselves on how profitable the flaws were. I kept my mouth shut, but it bugged me. 3 years later, around 2020, after one particularly stupid meeting, where a VP suggested we handle a data leak by just deleting it, I'd had enough. I went home, typed my resignation, hit send, and didn't even wait for a response. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Shield Path. I wanted something smarter, cleaner, actually bulletproof. A system that small hospitals and retailers could afford without needing a NASA budget. It was insane. I had no funding, no backup, just a pile of ideas, and Ray's voice in the back of my head saying, "Don't hold back this time." So I didn't. I rented a tiny office above an old auto shop. The floor creaked, the heater rattled, and the internet went out if someone sneezed too hard downstairs. I didn't care. I brought in my computer towers, some old servers, and a desk I found on Craigslist. My diet became canned soup and cheap instant meals. My sleep schedule was non-existent. Every day I wrote code until my eyes burned. I tested, broke things, rebuilt them. I started waking up on the floor with a keyboard mark on my face. I was so deep in it I barely noticed my phone battery dying from ignored calls. 6 months in, I had the first working version. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast, and it was secure. I sent out some demos. Got polite, "We'll review this," replies. Nothing promising yet, but it was a start. Then the fire happened. It was a Thursday night. I'd been debugging a module for a client test when the lights flickered. I figured the power grid was just throwing a fit again. 5 minutes later, the air smelled like burning plastic. I turned around and saw smoke curling from one of the extension cords near the back wall. "Fuh! Not now!" I yelled to myself, running over. I yanked the plug, but it was too late. The outlet was sizzling, and flames started licking up the drywall. I grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher, pulled the pin, and sprayed until the thing coughed out nothing but air. It wasn't enough. I ran to the door, but then it hit me. The servers. Everything I'd built was on those drives. Months of work. My brain said run, but my legs went the other way. I wrapped my hoodie around my mouth, ran back in, and unplugged the main rig. The smoke was thick enough to make my eyes sting. I dropped half the equipment, tripped over a box, landed wrong on my wrist. Pain shot up my arm. By the time I stumbled out, coughing like an idiot, the fire department was already pulling up. I stood there on the curb, watching the place burn. The office I'd poured my life into turned to black sludge in front of me. When it was over, one of the firefighters came over. "Insurance?" "Yeah," I said automatically. But later I'd learned my policy didn't cover electrical failure from faulty wiring. Basically, I was screwed. That night, I sat in my car staring at the equipment I'd managed to drag out. A half-melted monitor, one fried tower, and a server that looked like it had been through a war zone. For a second, I thought about just quitting. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was just wired for disappointment. Then I got a text from Ray. "Heard about the fire. You okay?" I told him what happened. He replied 2 minutes later. "Give me a day. I've got a guy who might be able to help." Next morning, he called. Old buddy of mine, retired systems engineer. Bit of a hermit, but the man can recover data like nobody's business. I told him you're worth the time. I drove 2 hours out to some small town where this guy lived. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in a decade, but he worked magic. Took my damaged drives, hooked them up to his Frankenstein setup and said, "Give me a week." 5 days later, he called. "Didn't get it all," he said when I showed up. But enough. I took it home, plugged it in, and stared at the code. Half gone, but the core was there. I rebuilt the rest from memory and side notes. Worked day and night. No distractions, no sleep, just raw focus. 3 months later, Shield Path wasn't just back. It was faster, stronger, smarter. The fire hadn't killed it. It had stripped out the weak parts. A month later, I got an email from a hospital chain I'd pitched to months earlier. They wanted to talk contracts. Then another from a retail group. When I saw the signed agreement come through, I just sat there staring at it, not even sure how to react. I picked up my phone and called Ray. He answered with his usual sarcasm. "You sound like someone who either won the lottery or got arrested." "I got it, Ray," I said. My voice was shaking. "The deal's real." He paused for a second, then laughed. "Then go for it, kid. Don't hold back this time." I didn't plan to. The first hospital contract opened the door, and within 6 months, Shield Path wasn't just a side project anymore. It was a full company. Word spread fast in the industry. Hospitals told each other, retailers called, even small government offices wanted in. Suddenly, I was on planes every week, pitching, fixing, scaling. It got to the point where I had to hire people just to keep my inbox under control. My first employee was a kid named Adam. Nervous, sharp, reminded me of myself before I grew the permanent dark circles under my eyes. Then came 3 more, then 10. Before I knew it, I was managing a real team. We moved out of my burned-out rental and into an actual office. A clean one this time. The kind where the floor didn't creak and the Wi-Fi didn't die every time someone flushed. I bought real desks, real chairs, even a snack bar. I used to joke that it was the most corporate thing I'd ever done. The growth was ridiculous. A few government offices started testing ShieldPath in pilot programs. Hospitals were recommending it to each other, and retail chains wanted better encryption for customer data. ShieldPath was spreading fast, and every new contract felt unreal. My parents, of course, had no clue. I kept quiet about it. It was funnier that way. At night, I'd look at the growing list of clients and think, so this is what it feels like to be the one they can't ignore. 2 winters later, the big offer came. A cybersecurity conglomerate, the kind that swallows smaller companies like appetizers, reached out. They wanted to buy ShieldPath outright, $50 million. I thought it was a prank at first. I reread the email 4 times before forwarding it to my lawyer. He confirmed it was legit. When the deal went through, I sat in the glass-walled conference room, staring at the final paperwork. The signatures looked fake, like they belonged to someone else. Everyone was shaking my hand, congratulating me, and I was just trying to process the fact that I wasn't broke anymore. I wasn't nothing anymore. Before signing, I called Uncle Ray. "Ray," I said, "I'm about to make you laugh." He groaned. "If this is another one of your security jokes, spare me." "No," I said, smiling. "Remember when you said I'd figure out how to land after crashing? You were right. ShieldPath's being bought out. $50 million. Silence. Then a long whistle. "Well, damn, kid. I was expecting good news, not a Bond villain announcement." I laughed. "You kept me afloat when everyone else bailed. I didn't forget. I already set aside a chunk for you. After the deal closes, you'll get your share. You're officially my partner in this mess." "Silas, that's your money." "It's our money." I cut him off. "You backed me when nobody else did. You earned it." For once, he didn't have a comeback. Just said, "You're a good man, kid," in that gruff voice that sounded like it was allergic to compliments. When I left that meeting, I didn't celebrate. I didn't go buy cars or throw parties. I went home, sat on the couch, and stared at my bank app like it was mocking me. $50 million. You'd think I'd feel unstoppable. Instead, I felt weirdly quiet inside. A week later, I bought a mountainside penthouse lodge in Colorado. It was halfway up a mountain, all glass and dark wood. The kind of place where the silence has weight to it. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a valley dusted in snow. I didn't buy it for the flex. I bought it because I wanted space, the kind my family never gave me. I designed everything myself. Picked the furniture, the lights, even the hardware finishes. It wasn't fancy for show. It was efficient, smart, clean. I hired a property manager named Layla, ex-hotel operations type, very organized, no nonsense. She ran the place better than most CEOs. Every morning, I'd stand by those windows with coffee in hand, watching the snow pile up and the fog slide through the trees. It was the exact opposite of my old apartment. Quiet, calm, peaceful. For the first time, I could hear myself think. Life felt stable. Work was solid, money wasn't an issue, and Ray and I talked almost every day. The company's transition went smoothly, and I had enough investments to keep me comfortable forever. All these events lead to the Christmas text day. The "we're keeping Christmas small." No deadbeats this year, so it'll only be your sister and her family. Same tone, same pattern, like I was some coworker they were politely excluding from a group lunch. I actually laughed out loud this time, not bitterly, just that short, sharp kind of laugh that comes from realizing some people never change. I remember standing next to the window. The mountains looked endless, the snow reflecting every bit of light, like the world was made of glass. Down below, my driveway curved through pine trees like something out of a postcard. I stood there holding my phone, thinking about every year they'd done this. Every family-only event, every last-minute uninvite. Marcy's kids probably got matching sweaters. I got a text message. "Small Christmas," I muttered. Yeah, real small without the one person who actually made something of himself. I wasn't the quiet kid begging for approval anymore. I wasn't the one fixing lights at Marcy's wedding or asking for flight money. I'd built something from scratch, from ashes and burned-out wiring, and now I had everything they said I couldn't have. So I set the phone down, took another sip of coffee, and smirked at my reflection in the window. If they didn't want me at their table, fine. This year, I'd build my own and make sure it was one they'd never be invited to again. I called Uncle Ray first. He picked up on the second ring. Same gruff voice. If you're calling to complain about your parents, get in line. Not this time, I said. I'm hosting Christmas. My place, Colorado. You in? He paused for half a second. Hell yes, I'm in. I'll bring Clara and whoever else isn't allergic to snow. Perfect, I said. Bring everyone. Next, I called Aunt Susie. Then cousins I hadn't seen since high school. Old Caltech friends. Even a few of my first Shield Path employees who stuck around through the rough days. Every single one said yes, no hesitation. The next few days were chaos. I had Layla handle the logistics. Flights, cars, rooms. She was a machine. By the time she was done, I had a full guest list, private shuttles, and enough food planned to feed a small army. The kitchen looked like a cooking show, the kind with 6 ovens and not enough swear words. By Christmas Eve, the lodge was alive. Luggage stacked by the door, laughter echoing off the walls, people I hadn't seen in years hugging like no time had passed. Uncle Ray walked in first, snow on his jacket, grinning like a kid. Kid, he said, looking around. You undersold it. This place looks like a movie set? Yeah, I said, smirking. Except the script's actually good this time. He laughed, clapped me on the back, and started introducing me to half the relatives I barely remembered. My cousin's kids ran around, sliding on the wood floors. The fireplace roared, music played, and for once, nobody was walking on eggshells. Then the phone started ringing. One of my cousins, Mark, looked down at his screen and said, it's your dad. Answer it, I said, already knowing how this would go. Mark put it on speaker. Hey, Uncle Jerry! Merry Christmas! Mark, where are you guys? We've been waiting all morning. Marcy's kids are opening presents. Mark glanced at me, half smiling. Oh, we're at Silas's place. Colorado. It's amazing up here. Dead silence. Then Dad's voice, sharp. You're where? At Silas's lodge, Mark said, trying not to laugh. He invited everyone. Dad hung up without another word. 2 minutes later, another cousin's phone rang. Then another. Mom was making the rounds now. Same question every time, same answer, same hang-up. I wasn't surprised. That's the thing about entitled people. They think the world's gone wrong when it stops revolving around them. By the time dinner rolled around, Layla had outdone herself. Roasted turkey, glazed ham, enough side dishes to require a second table. The air smelled like butter and cinnamon. The windows glowed orange from the fire. It felt like the kind of Christmas I used to imagine when I was a kid watching holiday commercials. Around 8, there was a knock at the door. Layla opened it, and standing there in a thick coat, snow in his hair, was Grandpa Frank. He grinned when he saw me. Told your parents I had the flu. Got on a plane anyway. I laughed. Of course you did. Come in, old man. He stepped inside, looked around, and just whistled. This is some setup, Silas. You finally did it. About time someone noticed, I said, handing him a plate. He winked. Oh, they noticed. Trust me. Your mom's calling everyone from the church group, trying to figure out how you pulled this off. The rest of the night was perfect. The kind of chaos that feels right. Ray arguing with Clara about who brought the wrong pie. Someone posted photos online. Christmas at Silas's lodge. The view is insane. Within an hour, they were everywhere. My inbox exploded with tags, mentions, DMs. Around 10, my phone buzzed with a text. From Marcy. Holy crap. That's your place? I stared at it for a second, then typed back, Yep, small Christmas this year. I put the phone down and went back to the living room. Ray was sitting near the fireplace, glass of soda in hand, watching everyone laugh. Look at this, he said, gesturing around. You built something real, kid. Not just money. This. Yeah, I said, leaning back in the chair. And I didn't even need a choir solo to get attention. He chuckled, shaking his head. The snow outside kept falling, thick and quiet. Inside, the room was warm, glowing, alive. I looked around. Family that actually cared, friends who'd seen me fail and still showed up, people eating, laughing, living. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider looking in through the window. I was the one with the house full of people, the one who made space for everyone else. And the best part? My parents were sitting somewhere, staring at their phones, realizing Christmas had finally gone on without them. The next morning, I was still half asleep when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Caller ID, Dad. Figures, I answered. Morning. Morning? His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You humiliated us, Silas. Everyone's talking about your little Christmas circus. What the hell were you thinking? I sat up, rubbed my eyes. I was thinking about having a nice holiday with people who actually show up. That was our Christmas, he snapped. You stole it. You invited everyone, our family, our friends, without even telling us. Correction, I said, keeping my tone calm. I invited the people you forgot existed. Big difference. In the background, I could hear Mom chiming in, all dramatic as usual. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Everyone saw those pictures online. Your lodge, your party, even your grandfather. People are calling us asking why we weren't there. I almost laughed. You mean at the place of your deadbeat son who you didn't invite to your Christmas? Yeah, that's crazy. Dad exhaled hard through his nose. You know what? I'm not doing this. Just tell me one thing. How did you even afford all that? Ah, there it was. The real reason for the call. I stood up, walked over to the big window. Snow was still coming down, the mountains glowing in the morning light. Everyone else was asleep. You remember Shield Path? I said casually. Yeah, he said. Your tech thing. What about it? I sold it, I said. For 50 million. Silence. For a full 10 seconds. Then Mom's voice, shaky and high. 50 what? Million, I repeated. With an M. Dad made a choking sound. You're joking. Nope, I said. It's real. You could Google it if you ever Googled anything besides Marcy's law firm. They both started talking at once, voices tripping over each other. Shock turning to something uglier. Mom was the first to say it. We're your family, Silas. That money, it belongs to all of us in a way. Excuse me? Well, we supported you through college, through your... I laughed. Supported me? You mean the years you ignored me, told me to get a real job, and cut me out of every holiday? That kind of support? Don't be ridiculous, Dad said. We're still your parents. You wouldn't even be where you are without us. At that exact moment, Grandpa Frank shuffled into the kitchen, wearing a robe and holding a mug. Who's making all that racket this early? I motioned him over. You're gonna love this, I said, putting the phone on speaker. Mom's voice came through loud and clear. Silas, listen. We're not asking for much. Just something fair, a family share. Grandpa set his mug down and leaned over the phone. You two have some nerve, he growled. Dad? My father said, surprised. Oh, don't dad me, Grandpa snapped. You ignored this boy for years, treated him like a screw-up, and now you're crying because he finally did something without you? You should be ashamed. Mom started stammering. We just... And Marcy, Grandpa cut in. If you're listening to this nonsense, you should be ashamed too. As if on cue, another voice joined in. Marcy, Grandpa, please, it's not like that. Our Christmas looked sad compared to his. Everyone was asking why we weren't invited. Then next time, Grandpa said, his voice sharp but steady. Treat him like family before you complain about missing out. Nobody said a word after that. You could practically hear their pride cracking through the speaker. Then Dad muttered something about talking later and hung up. Grandpa leaned back in the chair, grinning. That felt good. Better than coffee, I said. He chuckled. They'll get over it. Or they won't. Either way, you're free of their nonsense now. And he was right. The rest of the day was perfect. The snow outside was thick enough for a snowball war that lasted an hour. Ray and I got destroyed by a bunch of 10-year-olds, but I didn't even care. Inside, the kitchen smelled like pancakes and coffee. That night, I sat by the fire with Grandpa. He stared at the flames and said, You know, I think you finally found your people. Yeah, I said quietly. Took me long enough. He raised his mug. Make them earn your respect, kid. You're worth more than their approval. I nodded. Later, when I checked my phone before bed, there was a new message from Marcy. I'm sorry, Silas. I really am. I've been jealous for years. You took risks, and I just followed what Mom and Dad told me. I didn't see it then. I do now. I read it twice, locked my phone, and set it face down on the nightstand. No reply. Outside, snow kept falling. The fire popped once, then settled. It wasn't revenge, it was freedom. I built something real, not to prove them wrong, but to prove I could stand without them. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Story 3. My dad said, You've ruined our lives. You are a burden. So I smiled and left. My mom wrote, Don't come back. I wrote, Okay, I just stopped paying your mortgage. And then my phone exploded. I never thought I'd be writing this, but after everything that's happened in the past few months, I need to get this off my chest. My name is Sarah, I'm 29, and until recently, I was the family's unofficial ATM. This is the story of how I finally grew a spine and watched my entire family implode when they realized they'd been biting the hand that feeds them. Let me start from the beginning. I'm the middle child of three. My older brother Jake is 32, and my younger sister Emma is 25. Growing up, it was pretty obvious who the favorites were, and spoiler alert, it wasn't me. Jake was the golden child who could do no wrong, even when he was clearly doing everything wrong. Emma was the baby princess who got whatever she wanted with a pout and some crocodile tears. Me? I was the responsible one, the one who did her chores without being asked, got good grades without constant supervision, and somehow became the family's emotional support animal. While Jake was out partying and flunking college, and Emma was throwing tantrums about not getting the right brand of jeans, I was working part-time jobs to pay for my own clothes and school supplies. My parents, Linda and Mark, seemed to think this was just my natural role in life. Sarah's so independent, they'd say, like it was a compliment. What they really meant was, Sarah doesn't cost us money like the other two, so we can ignore her. When Jake dropped out of college for the third time, they paid for a gap year trip to Europe to help him find himself. When Emma decided she wanted to be a fashion influencer instead of finishing her business degree, they bought her a professional camera setup and paid for her apartment so she could focus on building her brand. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science, they came to my graduation and immediately started talking about Jake's new job at their friend's company and Emma's latest Instagram post that got 500 likes. I think they mentioned being proud of me once, right before asking if I'd seen Emma's new post. After college, I landed a job at a tech startup. The pay was decent, but nothing crazy. I moved into a tiny studio apartment and lived off ramen and determination. Meanwhile, Jake moved back in with my parents after his European adventure failed to provide him with any career inspiration. Emma also moved back home when her influencer dreams didn't immediately translate to income. Here's where things get interesting. About 3 years ago, the startup I was working for got acquired by a major tech company. My stock options, which I'd completely forgotten about, suddenly became worth a substantial amount of money. We're talking life-changing money. I went from living paycheck to having more money than I knew what to do with. Did I tell my family about the windfall? Hell no. I'd learned early that any good news I shared either got ignored or somehow turned into a conversation about my siblings. Instead, I quietly moved into a nice apartment, bought a reliable car, and started investing most of the money. I also started anonymously helping my parents with their bills. See, my parents had always been terrible with money. Dad worked as a middle manager at a manufacturing company, and Mom had a part-time job at a doctor's office. They made decent money, but between supporting 2 adult children and their own spending habits, they were always struggling. Their mortgage payments were consistently late, and I'd overheard more than one heated conversation about money. So I did what any loving daughter would do. I started secretly paying their mortgage. I set up an automatic payment from one of my accounts, and every month their mortgage got paid. I told myself it was an investment in family peace. My parents' stress levels went down. They stopped fighting about money as much, and I felt good about helping. What I didn't expect was for this arrangement to continue for 3 fucking years, while my parents attributed their improved financial situation to Dad's hard work and better budgeting. They never questioned where the extra money was coming from. They just accepted that suddenly they could afford their bills and started spending even more freely. Jake, meanwhile, had found his calling as a professional disappointment. He'd been between jobs for about 2 years, spending his days playing video games and his nights going out with friends. Emma had decided that influencing was too hard and was now pursuing her dream of becoming a yoga instructor, which apparently required expensive retreats and equipment that my parents happily funded. The breaking point came last month during Sunday dinner. I'd been having a rough week at work, dealing with a particularly difficult project, and considering whether to take a promotion that would require relocating. I thought it might be nice to have a family dinner and maybe talk through my options with people who supposedly cared about me. I should have known better. I walked into the house to find Jake sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, complaining loudly about how his latest job interview went. Apparently, they'd had the audacity to ask him about the 2-year gap in his employment history, and he was deeply offended by their lack of understanding. It's like they don't get that I've been focusing on personal growth, he was saying to Mom, who was nodding sympathetically while cooking his favorite meal. I can't help that the job market is so competitive. Emma was at the kitchen table, crying over her laptop. Her latest attempt at becoming an influencer, a lifestyle blog about sustainable living, had gotten 3 whole comments, and she was devastated that her content wasn't reaching a wider audience. Maybe you should get a real job, I suggested, sitting down at the table. I know it's not as glamorous as influencing, but it pays the bills. Emma looked at me like I'd suggested she start eating glass. You don't understand the creative process, Sarah. I can't just turn my passion on and off like you do with your computer stuff. My computer stuff. The computer stuff that was literally paying their mortgage every month. Dad came in from the garage, wiping oil off his hands. Sarah, good, you're here. We need to talk about your brother. Which one? I asked, though I knew exactly which one. Jake needs help getting back on his feet. He's been working really hard to find the right opportunity, but these companies just don't appreciate his unique perspective. We think it would be good for him to take some classes, maybe get certified in something. The problem is, the program he wants costs about $10,000. I stared at him. $10,000 for what? It's a life coaching certification, Jake said, not looking up from his game. I want to help people reach their potential. I've got a lot of wisdom to share from my experiences. His experiences. 2 years of unemployment and living in his childhood bedroom. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. Well, that's why we thought you could help, Mom said, bringing Jake a plate of food. You're doing so well with your career, and you don't have any real expenses like the rest of us. I blinked. No real expenses? You know what I mean. You don't have a family to support or anything. Your job pays well, and you live in that tiny apartment. You must have money saved up. The tiny apartment I'd moved to specifically so I could afford to help them, though they didn't know that. I don't really have $10,000 just lying around, I said, which was technically true. I had much more than that, but it was invested, and I wasn't about to liquidate assets to fund Jake's latest fantasy. Come on, Sarah, Jake said, finally looking at me. Family helps family. I'd do the same for you if you needed it. When have you ever done anything for me? I asked. That's not fair, Emma chimed in. Jake and I would totally help you if you needed it. You just never ask for help because you're so independent and perfect. Independent and perfect. Right. Because asking for help when you have 2 siblings who've never held down a job for more than 6 months is definitely a winning strategy. Look, Dad said, sitting down heavily. We're all struggling here. The mortgage has been harder to manage lately. And with Jake and Emma both at home, expenses are tight. We're a family, and families support each other. You're the only one in a position to help right now. The mortgage that I'd been paying for 3 years. The mortgage that had never been late since I started covering it. They were struggling with a mortgage that I was literally paying. What about Emma's certification? I asked. How much is yoga instructor training? That's different, Mom said quickly. Emma's investing in her health and wellness. It's a lifestyle choice. And Jake's life coaching thing isn't? Jake has real potential to help people, Dad said. He's always been good at motivating others and seeing the big picture. This certification would give him the credentials he needs to start his own business. The same Jake who hadn't motivated himself out of bed before noon in 2 years. I need to think about it, I said. What's to think about? Jake asked, pausing his game. Either you care about family or you don't. That's when something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the casual way he'd just questioned my love for my family while asking for $10,000. Maybe it was watching my parents nod along like his request was completely reasonable. Maybe it was the 3 years of secretly supporting these people while they criticized my life choices and acted like I was the selfish one. You want to know what I think about family? I asked, standing up. I think family members should support each other. I think family members should show up for each other. I think family members should celebrate each other's successes instead of ignoring them. We do support you, Mom said, looking confused. Really? When was the last time any of you asked me about my job? When was the last time you showed interest in my life that didn't involve asking for money or advice? That's not fair, Emma said. We care about you. You care about what I can do for you. There's a difference. Sarah, you're being dramatic, Dad said. We're just asking for help with $10,000. For Jake's life coaching certification? After he's been unemployed for 2 years and living rent-free in your house while I've been... I stopped myself before I said too much. While you've been what? Mom asked. I could have told them right then. I could have explained that I'd been paying their mortgage for 3 years, that their improved financial situation had nothing to do with Dad's budgeting and everything to do with my secret support. I could have laid out exactly how much I'd been helping them while they acted like I was the problem. Instead, I said, while I've been building a career and trying to be responsible. And we're proud of you for that, Dad said in that patronizing tone I'd learned to hate. But success comes with responsibility. You have an obligation to help your family when you can. An obligation. Yes. We sacrificed a lot to raise you kids. We put you through school, kept a roof over your head, fed you. Now that you're successful, it's time to give back. They put me through school. I'd had a part-time job since I was 16 and paid for most of my own expenses. I'd taken out student loans for college and paid them off myself. The roof over my head had been shared with two siblings who were actively making their lives more difficult while I tried to stay out of the way. What exactly did you sacrifice for me? I asked. Mom looked hurt. Sarah, how can you ask that? We gave you everything. You gave Jake everything. You gave Emma everything. I got hand-me-downs and lectures about being grateful. That's not true, Emma said, but she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Isn't it? When's the last time you bought me anything? When's the last time you offered to help me with anything? When's the last time you treated me like I mattered as much as Jake and Emma? You're being ridiculous, Jake said, unpausing his game. Just because you're jealous that Emma and I are pursuing our dreams instead of selling out to corporate America doesn't mean selling out? I'm selling out by having a job? You know what I mean. You chose money over happiness, and now you're bitter that we're brave enough to follow our passions. My passions. I loved my job. I was good at it, and it gave me the financial freedom to help my family, even though they didn't appreciate it. But apparently, that made me the sellout. My job makes me happy, I said. It also pays for things like food and housing and, apparently, other people's mortgages. What does that mean? Dad asked. This was it. The moment I could come clean and explain everything. The moment I could show them exactly how much their sellout daughter had been supporting them. The moment I could make them understand that their financial stability had nothing to do with their own efforts and everything to do with my generosity. But looking at their faces, Jake's entitled smirk, Emma's self-righteous pout, my parents' expectant expressions, I realized that telling them the truth wouldn't change anything. They'd just see it as proof that I owed them even more. They'd probably demand I continue paying their bills while also funding Jake's certification and whatever other dreams Emma came up with. So instead, I said, it means I'm done. Done with what? Mom asked. Done pretending that this is a family? Done pretending that you care about me? Done pretending that I owe you anything? Dad's face darkened. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. We're asking for help, not demanding. You're not asking. You're telling me I have an obligation. You're acting like my success is somehow your right to claim. You're treating me like an ATM with legs. That's not what we're doing, Mom said, but her voice was uncertain. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you invited me over for dinner without needing something from me? When was the last time you acted like you were proud of me instead of resentful? We are proud of you, Dad said, but it sounded hollow. No, you're not. You're embarrassed by me. You think I'm boring and materialistic because I have a stable job and don't need constant financial support. You act like my success is somehow an indictment of your parenting because I didn't turn out like Jake and Emma. Your siblings are good kids, Mom said defensively. Your siblings are 32 and 25 years old, and they're living in their childhood bedrooms while demanding that other people fund their dreams. At what point do they stop being kids and start being adults? They're trying, Dad said. They're not trying. They're expecting. They expect you to pay for everything. They expect me to pay for everything. They expect the world to hand them success without having to work for it. And you think you're better than them? Jake asked, finally turning around to face me. I think I'm more responsible than them. I think I'm more independent than them. I think I'm more grateful than them. Grateful for what? You act like we never did anything for you? What did you do for me, Jake? Specifically, what did you ever do for me? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Emma jumped in. We were always there for you growing up. No, you weren't. You were there when you needed something from me. You were there when you wanted me to cover for you or lie to Mom and Dad about where you were going. You were there when you needed homework help or money for gas. But when I needed support, when I was dealing with bullies at school or stressed about college applications or going through a breakup, where were you? Silence. You know what? This conversation is pointless. You've already decided that I'm the bad guy because I won't immediately hand over $10,000 to fund Jake's latest fantasy. You've already decided that my job and my life choices make me somehow less valuable than your unemployed son and wannabe influencer daughter. You've already decided that I exist to serve this family instead of being part of it. Sarah, that's not... Mom started. Yes, it is. You want to know what I think about family? I think family members should lift each other up, not tear each other down. I think family members should celebrate each other's successes, not resent them. I think family members should support each other emotionally, not just financially. And I think family members should respect each other enough to not make demands disguised as requests. We do respect you, Dad said. No, you don't. You respect my bank account. You respect my usefulness. But you don't respect me as a person, and you never have. That's a horrible thing to say, Mom said, tears starting to form in her eyes. It's a horrible thing to be true, I replied. But it is true, and all of you know it. I walked toward the door, done with this conversation and done with these people. Where are you going? Dad called after me. Home. Sarah, wait, Mom said, following me. Don't leave like this. We can work this out. I turned around at the door. How? How do we work this out? Are you going to suddenly start treating me like I matter? Are Jake and Emma going to suddenly become self-sufficient adults? Are you going to stop seeing me as a piggy bank and start seeing me as a daughter? You're being unreasonable, Dad said, coming up behind Mom. We love you, but you're acting like a spoiled brat. We raised you better than this. You raised me to be invisible unless you needed something from me. You raised me to put everyone else's needs before my own. You raised me to believe that my value as a person was directly tied to what I could do for other people. Well, congratulations. Your parenting worked perfectly. Sarah, Jake said, standing up from the couch, you're being dramatic. We're family. Families fight sometimes, but we always work it out. We don't fight, Jake. You all make demands, and I either comply or I'm the bad guy. That's not fighting. That's manipulation. You're being ridiculous, Emma said. We're not manipulating you. We're asking for help because we know you love us. If you knew I loved you, you'd care about my feelings. You'd ask about my life. You'd show interest in my thoughts and dreams and fears. You'd treat me like a person instead of a resource. We do treat you like a person, Mom insisted. When? Give me one example from the past year when you treated me like a person whose feelings mattered. They all looked at each other, and I could see them trying to think of something. The fact that they had to think about it said everything. That's what I thought, I said. You know what the really sad part is? I would have helped Jake with his certification. I would have helped Emma with whatever she needed. I would have continued helping all of you, probably forever, if you just once made me feel like I was part of this family instead of just a bank account with legs. You are part of this family, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, I'm not. I'm a convenient source of money and advice. I'm someone you call when you need something fixed or paid for. I'm someone you turn to when your actual children disappoint you, but I'm not someone you celebrate or support or love unconditionally. That's not true, Mom said, crying now. Mom, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you asked about my job in a way that showed you actually cared about the answer? When was the last time you invited me to dinner without needing something from me? She couldn't answer, and that was answer enough. I'm done enabling this dysfunction, I said. I'm done pretending that being related to you makes this a healthy relationship. I'm done sacrificing my emotional well-being for people who see me as useful but not valuable. Sarah, please, Dad said. You're upset, but don't make any decisions you'll regret. We're your family. We'll always be your family. Family is supposed to be a source of love and support, not stress and resentment. Family is supposed to build you up, not tear you down. Family is supposed to care about your happiness, not just your usefulness. We do care about your happiness, Emma said. When have you ever asked me if I was happy? When have any of you ever asked me what I wanted or needed or dreamed about? More silence. You've ruined our lives, Dad said suddenly, his tone shifting from pleading to angry. You come in here with your superiority complex and your accusations, and you're destroying this family. You're selfish and ungrateful, and you're hurting your mother with this ridiculous tantrum. I've ruined your lives? How exactly have I ruined your lives? You're tearing this family apart with your selfishness. You're making your siblings feel bad about themselves because you can't stand that they're following their dreams instead of selling their souls like you did. There it was. The real feelings coming out now that I wasn't immediately complying with their demands. And you're a burden, Dad continued, his face red with anger. You've always been a burden. You're negative and critical and impossible to please. You suck the joy out of every family gathering with your attitude. Maybe it would be better if you just stayed away. A burden. After 3 years of paying their mortgage, after a lifetime of trying to earn their love and approval, after sacrificing my own emotional needs to keep their family functional, I was a burden. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to contradict him, to defend me, to show some sign that she disagreed with his assessment. Instead, she just stood there crying, which I'd learned long ago was her way of avoiding taking any position that might upset someone. You know what? I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. You're absolutely right. I am a burden. I'm a burden because I have expectations. I'm a burden because I want to be treated like I matter. I'm a burden because I think family should be about more than financial transactions. I smiled, and I could see it unsettled them. They were expecting me to cry or argue or apologize. Instead, I felt this strange sense of relief, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly been lifted. Thank you for clarifying where I stand, I continued. It makes my decision much easier. What decision? Mom asked. The decision to stop being a burden. I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove home. My phone started ringing before I was even out of their driveway, but I didn't answer. I had some things to take care of. The first thing I did when I got home was call my bank. I canceled the automatic payment that had been covering my parents' mortgage for the past 3 years. Then I transferred the money that would have gone to their next payment into my savings account instead. The second thing I did was block my family's phone numbers. I wasn't ready to hear their voices or read their messages. I needed time to process what had just happened and decide how I wanted to move forward. The third thing I did was open a bottle of wine and order Thai food. For the first time in years, I had a Sunday evening that was completely my own, with no family drama or financial obligations or guilt trips. It was surprisingly peaceful. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning, I went to work and told my boss I was interested in the promotion we'd discussed, the one that would require relocating to our company's Seattle office. I'd been hesitant because it would mean moving away from my family, but suddenly that seemed like a feature rather than a bug. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from blocked numbers, but I ignored them. Around lunchtime, I got a text from my mom's friend Janet, who I barely knew. It just said, "Your mother is very upset. Please call home." I deleted the text without responding. Tuesday afternoon, I got an email from Emma at my work address. The subject line was, "Emergency, please read." The email was a long, rambling message about how I was being unfair and how the family needed to stick together and how she couldn't believe I was punishing everyone because I was in a bad mood. I forwarded the email to my personal account and blocked her work email address. If there was a real emergency, they could call 911. Wednesday, I came home to find Jake sitting on my doorstep. He looked like he'd been there for a while. "We need to talk," he said, standing up as I approached. "No, we don't." "Sarah, come on. You're being ridiculous. Mom's been crying for 3 days. Dad's barely eating. Emma's having panic attacks. You're destroying the family over a stupid fight." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not participating anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done being the family's emotional and financial support system. It means I'm done pretending that being treated like garbage is normal, just because we share DNA. Nobody treats you like garbage. Jake, 3 days ago, Dad called me a burden and told me I've ruined your lives. How is that not treating me like garbage? He was upset. He didn't mean it. He absolutely meant it. And you know what? He was right. I have been a burden. I've been carrying the financial and emotional weight of this family for years, and it's been a burden on me. So I'm setting it down." "What are you talking about? You don't carry any financial weight. You live alone in your little apartment and spend your money on yourself." I stared at him. Even now, even after everything, he had no idea what I'd been doing for them. "Jake, who do you think has been paying Mom and Dad's mortgage for the past 3 years?" "What do you mean? Their mortgage. Who do you think has been making the payments? Because it sure as hell wasn't them." His face went blank. "What are you talking about?" "I've been anonymously paying their mortgage since 2021. Every month, the payment comes out of my account. That's why their financial situation improved. That's why they stopped fighting about money. That's why they could afford to support you and Emma. That's not..." "You're lying." "Why would I lie about that? Do you think they magically got better at budgeting? Do you think Dad got a secret raise? The only thing that changed was me starting to help them. But they never said..." "They never knew. I set it up to be anonymous because I knew if they found out, they'd start seeing it as an entitlement instead of a gift." Jake sat down heavily on my steps. "You've been paying their mortgage? Every month for 3 years. $2,400 a month. Plus I've helped with other bills when they needed it. I've probably given them over $100,000 in total. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I knew this would happen. I knew that the moment you all found out I had money, you'd start seeing me as an ATM. I knew you'd stop being grateful and start being demanding. And I was right, wasn't I? The moment Dad thought I had money to spare, he immediately started making demands and calling me selfish for not wanting to fund your life coaching fantasy." Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "So what happens now?" "Now? Now you all figure out how to pay your own bills. I've canceled the mortgage payments. Your parents will get a notice that their payment is overdue in about a week. Sarah, you can't do that to them. They'll lose the house. They should have thought about that before calling me a burden and telling me I've ruined their lives. They didn't mean it. Jake, I've been helping them for 3 years without asking for anything in return. Not gratitude, not recognition, not even basic respect. All I wanted was to be treated like I mattered. And instead, Dad called me a burden and told me to stay away. So I'm giving him exactly what he asked for. What about Emma and me? We didn't know about any of this. Emma called me selfish and materialistic for having a job. You called me a sellout and questioned whether I cared about family. You both acted like I owed you money just because we're related. You both treated me like my success was somehow taking away from your opportunities. We were just frustrated. You were entitled. There's a difference. Jake stood up. So that's it? You're just going to abandon the family? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not enabling anyone anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on something other than what I can do for you. And if we can't pay the mortgage, then you'll have to figure something out. Get jobs, maybe. Become self-sufficient adults. Revolutionary concept, I know. Sarah, please. I know we haven't been the best family, but we can change. We can do better. You can do better. Whether you will or not remains to be seen. What would it take for you to help us again? Jake, the fact that you're asking that question shows that you still don't get it. I don't want to be needed for my money. I want to be wanted for who I am. I want to be valued as a person, not as a resource. We do value you. No, you don't. And the really sad part is, you probably never will. You'll always see me as the responsible one who should handle the hard stuff so you don't have to. You'll always see my success as something that should benefit you, rather than something to be proud of. You'll always see my emotional needs as secondary to your financial ones. Jake left after that, and I spent the evening researching apartments in Seattle. The promotion was looking better and better. Thursday morning, I unblocked my parents' numbers just long enough to send them a text. Jake told me you didn't know about the mortgage payments. That's probably something you should discuss with your bank. Also, I've accepted a promotion that requires relocating. I'll be moving to Seattle next month. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing within seconds, and the voicemails and text messages were coming in faster than I could delete them. From Mom, Sarah, please call us. We need to talk about this. We had no idea about the mortgage. Please don't move away. We can fix this. From Dad, you can't just abandon your family because you're upset. We raised you better than this. Call me immediately. From Emma, I can't believe you're being this petty. Moving away isn't going to solve anything. You're just running away from your problems. From Jake, Mom won't stop crying. Dad's having chest pains. Emma's talking about moving in with her boyfriend because she can't handle the stress. Are you happy now? I read them all, then blocked their numbers again. I wasn't responsible for managing their emotions anymore. Friday afternoon, I got a call at work from my mom. She'd somehow gotten the main office number and convinced the receptionist to transfer her to my desk. Sarah, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Mom, I told you I needed space. Honey, we need to talk. This is all just a big misunderstanding. We love you so much, and we never meant to make you feel unappreciated. It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. It's a pattern that's been going on for years. But we didn't know about the mortgage payments. If we'd known, we would have been more grateful. Would you? Or would you have just started expecting it? Would you have seen it as proof that I owed you more? That's not fair. Mom, what did you think had changed? 3 years ago, you and Dad were fighting about money constantly. You were behind on bills, stressed about the mortgage, barely making ends meet. Then suddenly, everything was fine. Did you really think Dad had just gotten that much better at budgeting? We thought, I don't know what we thought. We were just grateful that things were easier. But you never asked why they were easier. You never questioned it. You just accepted the help and assumed it was your right. We didn't know it was help. We thought we were managing better. Mom, your mortgage payment is $2,400 a month. Dad brings home maybe $3,000 after taxes. How did you think you were affording a $2,400 mortgage payment plus utilities, food, car payments, and supporting 2 adult children on $3,000 a month? Silence. You didn't think about it because you didn't want to think about it. You wanted to believe that everything was fine so you could keep spending money you didn't have on children who should have been supporting themselves. Sarah, please. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. Just come home and we'll talk about it. There's nothing to fix, Mom. This is who you are. This is who this family is. You take and take and take. And when someone finally says no, you make them feel guilty for setting boundaries. That's not true, isn't it? Right now, instead of apologizing for calling me a burden, you're trying to guilt me into coming back by talking about how upset everyone is. Instead of acknowledging that you treated me badly, you're focused on fixing the financial problem. Instead of asking what you can do to repair our relationship, you're trying to manipulate me into resuming the relationship on your terms. I just want my family back together. No, you want your ATM back online. There's a difference. I hung up and asked the receptionist to block calls from that number. That weekend, I drove to Seattle to look at apartments. The city was beautiful, and I found a perfect one-bedroom place with a view of the Sound. I put down a deposit and signed the lease. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future. Monday morning, I put in my 2 weeks' notice at my current position and started planning the logistics of my move. My boss was supportive, and my new team in Seattle was excited to have me. Everything was falling into place. Tuesday evening, I came home to find my parents' car in my apartment complex parking lot. They were sitting on the hood, and they'd clearly been waiting for a while. "We need to talk," Dad said as soon as he saw me. "No, we don't. Sarah, please. Just give us 5 minutes. You had my entire childhood to treat me with respect and kindness. You had 3 years of me secretly supporting you to show some appreciation. You had last Sunday to choose your words carefully when I was asking for basic consideration. You don't get 5 minutes now. We're your parents," Mom said. "That has to count for something. It counts for a lot. It counts for why this hurts so much. It counts for why I spent 3 years trying to help you even when you didn't appreciate it. It counts for why I'm moving across the country instead of just cutting you off completely." "You're moving because of us?" Dad asked. "I'm moving because I've realized that as long as I stay here, you'll keep treating me like a backup plan instead of a daughter. You'll keep seeing me as someone who exists to solve your problems instead of someone whose problems matter too." "Your problems matter," Mom said. "When have you ever asked about my problems? When have you ever offered to help me with anything? You never seemed like you needed help. I never seemed like I needed help because I couldn't afford to need help. I was too busy being the stable one, the reliable one, the one who had her shit together. I was too busy making sure everyone else was okay to admit that I wasn't okay." "What do you mean you weren't okay?" Dad asked, and for the first time, he sounded genuinely concerned. "I mean, I've been depressed and anxious for years. I mean, I've been seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional damage from growing up feeling invisible and unimportant. I mean, I've been questioning my self-worth and my ability to form healthy relationships because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally only seemed to love me when I was useful." "We didn't know," Mom whispered. "You didn't ask. You never ask. You never check in on my emotional state or my mental health or my happiness. You call when you need something, and when you don't need something, you forget I exist." "That's not true," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad, when was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing?" He couldn't answer. "When was the last time either of you asked about my job in a way that showed you actually cared about my career goals?" Silence. "When was the last time you invited me to dinner without needing help with something or wanting to discuss Jake and Emma's problems?" More silence. "When was the last time you told me you were proud of me without immediately changing the subject to one of my siblings?" "We are proud of you," Mom said. "Are you? What are you proud of? Specifically, what have I accomplished that makes you proud?" "You have a good job." "What kind of job? What do I do for work? What company do I work for? What's my title?" They looked at each other, and I could see them trying to remember if I'd ever told them these basic facts about my life. "You work with computers," Dad said finally. "That's not an answer. That's a guess based on my college major from 7 years ago." "We're sorry," Mom said. "We should have paid more attention." "Yes, you should have. But the fact that you didn't shows me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family." "We can do better," Dad said. "We want to do better." "Why? Because you need me to start paying your mortgage again?" "No," Mom said quickly. "Because we love you and we don't want to lose you." "So, you don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love having a daughter who's successful enough to make you look good, but distant enough that you don't have to actually invest in her emotional well-being. You love having someone who will bail you out of financial trouble but won't demand anything in return." "Sarah, that's not fair," Dad said. "What's not fair is spending my entire adult life trying to earn love that should have been freely given. What's not fair is sacrificing my emotional health to maintain relationships with people who don't value me. What's not fair is being called a burden after years of carrying this family financially and emotionally." "I shouldn't have said that," Dad admitted. "I was angry and I said things I didn't mean. You meant them. Maybe you regret saying them out loud, but you meant them. And you know what? You were right. I was a burden. I was a burden because I expected to be treated like I mattered. I was a burden because I wanted emotional intimacy instead of just financial transactions. I was a burden because I thought family meant more than just people who shared DNA." "It does mean more than that," Mom said. "Does it? Then prove it. Show me that this relationship is about more than money. Show me that you value me as a person, not just as a resource." "How?" Dad asked. "Start by respecting my decision to move to Seattle. Stop trying to guilt me into coming back. Stop making this about what you need, and start thinking about what might be best for me." "But we need you," Mom said. No, you don't. You need my money. You need my stability. You need my willingness to solve your problems. But you don't need me as a person. And you never have. That's not true, Dad said. But he couldn't meet my eyes. Dad, if I died tomorrow, what would you miss about me? Not what I did for you, but who I was as a person. What would you miss? The question hung in the air, and their inability to answer it immediately told me everything I needed to know. I thought so, I said. You should go. I have packing to do. Sarah, please, Mom said, starting to cry. Don't end it like this. We're family. We're related, I corrected. Family is something you build through love and respect and mutual support. Family is something you earn by being there for each other emotionally, not just financially. Family is something we could have had if you'd ever seen me as more than a backup plan. They left after that, and I went inside and poured myself a glass of wine. 2 weeks later, I was in Seattle, starting my new job and my new life. That was 3 months ago. My parents have sent me a few texts since then, mostly updates about their financial situation and requests to talk things through. Jake has reached out twice, once to ask if I'd reconsider helping with his certification, and once to inform me that he'd gotten a job at a call center and was finally ready to be responsible. Emma has sent me several Instagram DMs alternating between apologies and accusations. I haven't responded to any of them. Story 4. This story is titled, Brother Ruined My Life and My Parents Disowned Me. But now he shows up and begs me to help him because parents are threatening to cut him off financially. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit. I'm Emily, 28 female, and to put it bluntly, I was never supposed to exist. At least not as a girl. That sounds dramatic, but it's the truth. My mom always dreamed of having 2 boys. She wanted her perfect, sporty little team of sons to carry on the family name and be everything she'd envisioned in her head. When she got pregnant with me and found out I was a girl, she was devastated. My Aunt Rachel, who I'm still close with, once told me something I've never been able to shake. Apparently, when my mom found out I was a girl, she actually looked into terminating the pregnancy. By the time she got serious about it, it was too late and considered risky. So I was born. Not as a blessing, but as a regret. Mom never outright told me I was unwanted, but she didn't have to. It was in the way she looked at me, the way she treated me, and honestly, the way she talked about me when she didn't think I was listening. I was a fussy baby, a needy toddler, and later, a difficult child. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And then there was my older brother, Jake, 30 male, who could do no wrong. Jake was their golden boy, the apple of their eye. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, charming, and honestly, a complete jerk. But my parents didn't see that. To them, Jake was perfect. If you asked them back then or even now, he practically walked on water. Jake wasn't just the favorite. He was the villain in my story. He made it his life's mission to make me miserable. Growing up, Jake had this knack for getting me into trouble. If something went wrong in the house, it was always, Emily did it. He broke Mom's favorite vase? Must have been me. He took money out of Dad's wallet? Obviously my fault. He'd come up with these wild, detailed lies, and no matter how absurd they sounded, my parents always believed him. It got to a point where I didn't even bother defending myself anymore. What was the point? They never listened. Jake was always just being a kid or didn't mean any harm, while I was labeled as the troublemaker who needed to learn how to behave. But Jake didn't stop at just lying. He made school hell for me too. He spread rumors about me to my classmates, sometimes in ways that were so subtle I didn't even realize it was him at first. I'd notice friends pulling away, acting distant, and then find out weeks later that Jake had told them I said something nasty about them, or that I was too weird to hang out with. By the time I hit middle school, I didn't have many close friends left. I couldn't bring people over to the house because Jake would either humiliate me in front of them or later use whatever he overheard against me. He'd twist my words and make it sound like I was bad-mouthing our parents or being ungrateful. And of course, Mom and Dad believed him every single time. The favoritism was glaringly obvious. For example, every year, Jake got a big birthday party with all his friends, fancy decorations, and even a rented bounce house one time. When it came to my birthday, it was a cake at the dining table and maybe a card if they remembered. One year they forgot entirely. Jake made sure to rub that one in. Guess you're just not that important, he sneered. It's not like I was a perfect child or anything. I wasn't super outgoing, and yeah, I was a bit sensitive. But can you blame me? Growing up in a house where I was constantly put down or ignored took a toll on me. I felt like I was screaming into a void, desperate for someone to notice me, to care. But the only people who seemed to matter in that house were Jake and my parents. And Jake? He reveled in it. He knew he was the favorite, and he used that power against me every chance he got. If I ever dared to call him out or stand up for myself, he'd run to mom and dad, spinning some story about how I was being mean to him or starting fights. It didn't matter that he was the instigator. He was the golden child, and I was the problem. I remember one time in high school when I finally thought I'd caught a break. I'd worked up the courage to try out for the school play. I wasn't the lead or anything, but I got a decent role, and for once I was proud of myself. I told my parents about it, hoping maybe they'd come see me perform. Jake immediately jumped in with, "Why would anyone want to watch her embarrass herself on stage?" My mom didn't even defend me. She just shrugged and said, "Maybe next time, Emily." That was the moment I realized they weren't just indifferent. They were actively uninterested in me. Jake wasn't just cruel. He was calculated. He knew exactly how to get under my skin and make me feel small. And the worst part? He never faced any consequences for it. Mom and dad never called him out or punished him. If anything, they encouraged it by always taking his side. Every day felt like a battle I was destined to lose. I'd try to focus on school or my hobbies, but Jake was always there, lurking in the background, ready to tear me down. And my parents? They didn't care. To them, Jake could do no wrong, and I was just there. A mistake they couldn't undo. And yet, somehow, I survived. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the faint hope that one day things would get better. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't force people to love you. You just have to find the strength to walk away. And that's exactly what I did later. By the time I turned 18, I was done. Like completely done. With my family. I knew the only way I'd ever have a chance at real happiness was to get out of there. So I put everything I had into school. I wasn't just trying to get good grades. I was fighting for freedom. I worked my butt off to get a scholarship to a college out of state. I applied to every program, wrote essay after essay, and spent hours filling out financial aid forms. The moment I got my acceptance letter from a school in California with a partial scholarship, I cried not because I was sad, but because I finally saw a way out. The day I left for college, I didn't even get so much as a "we'll miss you" from my parents. They helped Jake pack up and move into his fully furnished apartment when he decided to live on his own. Me? I got a pat on the back and a good luck. My mom even had the nerve to say, "Don't forget to call us if you need help," knowing full well they wouldn't lift a finger. Jake stayed in our tiny Illinois hometown. Of course, my parents paid for everything. His rent, his car, even his groceries. Meanwhile, I was on my own. I remember walking into my dorm room, looking around at the bare walls, and realizing this was the first time I was truly free. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Once I left, my parents wasted no time cutting me out of their lives. At first, I tried keeping in touch. I called them a couple of times, but the conversations were short and awkward. They never asked how I was doing or how school was going. They just updated me on Jake's life. How he got a new car, how he was hosting some big party, how he and his girlfriend, Sarah at the time, were getting serious. It didn't take long for me to realize they didn't care about my life at all. So, I stopped calling, and honestly, they didn't seem to notice. Our family group chat became the Jake Show. It was all about his accomplishments, like how he grilled the best steak at a BBQ, or how he was thinking of starting his own business, which never happened. Meanwhile, I was balancing 15 credit hours, 2 part-time jobs, and endless study sessions just to keep my scholarship. There were days when I didn't know how I was going to make it. I'd work late shifts at a campus coffee shop, then stay up until 2 a.m. cramming for exams. I lived on instant ramen and dollar store mac and cheese because that's all I could afford. Some days, I felt like I was barely holding it together, but I refused to call home for help. Not that they would have offered any, but I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. Even when things got tough, I couldn't bring myself to regret leaving. My senior year of college was a turning point for me. That's when I met Ethan, the man who would eventually become my husband. I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time. I was too busy trying to survive. But Ethan kind of fell into my life in the best way possible. We met during a group project in one of my classes. He was one of those people who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just for the project, but for who I was as a person. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't used to people being kind without some ulterior motive, thanks to my family. But Ethan wasn't like that. He was patient and kind, and he made me feel like I was worth something. One of the things that stood out to me the most about Ethan was his family. I'll never forget the first time he invited me to dinner at his parents' house. I was so nervous, but they made me feel welcome from the moment I walked through the door. His mom hugged me like she'd known me forever, and his dad joked about how Ethan never brought anyone home unless they were the real deal. They asked about my life, my classes, and my plans for the future. They listened, like actually listened. It was such a stark contrast to my own family that I didn't know how to react at first. But over time, I started to let my guard down. Ethan's family became the support system I never had. His mom would send me care packages during finals week, filled with snacks and little notes of encouragement. His dad offered to help me fix my car when it broke down, even though he barely knew me at the time. They treated me better in a month than my own parents had my entire life. Graduating college felt like the ultimate victory. My parents didn't come to my graduation, of course, but Ethan and his family were there, cheering me on. After graduation, Ethan and I moved in together. We didn't have much, but we made it work. I got a job in marketing, and he started working as an engineer. We built a life together, piece by piece, and for the first time, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. My wedding was the final nail in the coffin for me and my family. I think a lot of people have this idea that weddings bring families together, that they're this magical event where even the most strained relationships can heal. Yeah, that wasn't my experience. My wedding didn't bring my family closer. It exposed, actually confirmed, just how little they cared about me. When Ethan proposed, I was over the moon. He popped the question on a quiet hike, just the two of us. It was simple and perfect. Exactly what I wanted. After I got home, I took a picture of the ring and sent it to my family group chat with a little "I said yes" message. I wasn't expecting a parade or anything, but I thought I'd at least get a congrats or some kind of acknowledgement. Instead, nothing. I got left on read. I checked the chat later that night, and I could see they'd all read the message. My mom didn't reply. My dad didn't reply. And Jake? Of course not. I even double-checked to make sure the message was actually sent. It was. They just chose to ignore it. That was the first time I realized they probably weren't going to care about my wedding at all. And I was right. As I started planning, I kept trying to include them. I'd send my mom texts asking for her opinion on things like venues or color schemes. Nothing big, just stuff like, "What do you think of these flowers?" Or, "Do you have any recommendations for a dress shop?" Half the time, she wouldn't reply. The other half, she'd give me these one-word answers like "nice" or "pretty," which basically screamed, "I don't care." At one point, I even asked if she wanted to come with me to look at dresses. She said she was too busy. Too busy doing what? I have no idea. Watching TV, maybe? So I just stopped sending anything. Meanwhile, Ethan's mom was over the moon. She helped me pick out my dress, organize the guest list, and even spent an entire weekend DIYing centerpieces with me. She made me feel like I actually mattered. Jake, on the other hand, took it a step further. Not only did he not care about my wedding, but he actively tried to sabotage it. My cousin Megan, the only family member I still talk to, and she's now renting a room in my parents' house because her parents are in a different country and were worried about her living on her own. Anyways, later told me how he convinced my parents that I was disrespectful and ungrateful for not involving them enough in the wedding prep. He told them I didn't care about their opinions and that I was intentionally leaving them out of everything. What really pissed me off was that it wasn't true. I tried. I reached out. I asked for their help. They were the ones who didn't care. They were the ones who ignored me. But of course, Jake spun it like I was the bad guy. And my parents, being who they are, were easily convinced. Things escalated when I sent out the wedding invitations. I included my parents and Jake, of course, even though I was starting to wonder why I bothered. A few weeks later, I called my mom to ask if they'd RSVP'd yet because I hadn't heard anything. Her response? "Oh, we haven't decided if we're coming yet. Jake said we should think about it." Think about it? What was there to think about? It was my wedding. I was their daughter. But apparently Jake had been telling them how I didn't deserve their support. He told them I only reached out to them when I wanted something, and that I didn't truly value them as a family. That was rich coming from Jake, who spent his entire life taking from them without giving anything back. He got everything handed to him on a silver platter, but somehow I was the ungrateful one for not worshiping them the way he did. As the wedding got closer, it became clear they weren't coming. My mom stopped responding to my messages altogether, and my dad barely said 2 words to me when I called. Megan tried to convince them to change their minds, but Jake doubled down, telling them they were supposed to be the center of everything. The irony of that statement still makes me laugh. I literally asked them to be part of the process. I wanted them to be involved, but they made it clear over and over again that they didn't want to step in. And now they were twisting it. The wedding day came, and they weren't there. No text, no call, nothing. Just empty seats where my parents and brother should have been. I won't lie, it hurt. Even though I knew not to expect much from them, it still stung to look out into the crowd and not see them there. But Ethan's family? They showed up in full force. His parents, his siblings, his cousins, they were all there, cheering us on and celebrating with us. His mom even gave a little toast during the reception, saying how proud they were to officially welcome me into the family. After the wedding, I decided I was done. I didn't call my parents to ask why they didn't come. I didn't send them pictures or updates. I didn't even bother replying when Jake sent me a snarky text saying, "Hope your big day was worth ignoring your family." I blocked Jake's number after that. I figured there was no point in keeping the lines of communication open when all he ever did was tear me down. If they didn't want to be part of my life, that was their choice. But I wasn't going to keep trying for people who couldn't even bother to show up for me. So, while I was over in California building a life with Ethan, my brother Jake stayed back home, basking in his golden child glory. If you've been keeping up, you already know that my parents worship the ground Jake walks on. That didn't change when he got married. In fact, it only got worse. Jake married Sarah, and my parents went all out for their wedding. I didn't get an invite, not that I'd have gone, but my cousin Megan kept me in the loop. She told me they practically covered everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers, even Sarah's dream dress. Megan said the whole thing probably cost more than what most people spend on a down payment for a house. Speaking of houses, guess who got one of those too? Yep, Jake and Sarah didn't even have to worry about buying their first home because my parents bought it for them. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a nice suburban neighborhood, all fully furnished. Meanwhile, I was over here in California, working 2 jobs just to save up for a decent apartment with Ethan. Megan would call me every once in a while with updates about Jake's charmed life. According to her, my parents were over at his house constantly, doting on him and Sarah like they were royalty. They'd babysit their dog, help with landscaping, and even stock their fridge when Sarah didn't feel like grocery shopping. I'll admit, hearing all that stung a little. Not because I wanted their help, I'd been fine on my own for years, but because it was just another reminder of how differently they treated us. When I got married, they couldn't even bother to send me a text. But for Jake, the sky was the limit. For a while, everything seemed picture perfect for Jake and Sarah. My parents bragged about them to anyone who would listen, acting like they were the epitome of success. Megan told me how they'd gush about how Jake found such a wonderful wife and how they're building such a beautiful life together. But then, things started to shift. After a couple of years, my parents started dropping hints about grandchildren. At first, it was subtle. Little comments about how a baby would make their family complete, or how they couldn't wait to spoil a grandchild. But subtlety isn't really their strong suit, so it quickly escalated. Megan told me my mom became borderline obsessed with the idea of grandkids. She'd bring it up every chance she got, pestering Jake and Sarah about when they were going to start a family. My dad wasn't much better. He'd make comments about continuing the family name, and how it was Jake's responsibility as the eldest son to carry on the legacy. I wasn't surprised, honestly. My parents have always been weirdly traditional, especially when it comes to family stuff. They don't just want grandkids, they want biological grandkids. Adoption? Not an option in their eyes. It had to be blood-related grandchildren, preferably a boy to carry on the name. Jake and Sarah, for their part, tried to dodge the topic for as long as they could. Megan said Sarah would laugh it off or change the subject, while Jake would make vague excuses about not being ready yet. But my parents weren't buying it. They started pushing harder, to the point where it became this constant source of tension. Megan told me about one family dinner, where my mom straight up asked Sarah if she was on birth control and when she planned to stop taking it. Sarah looked mortified, but my mom didn't care. One day, during one of my regular catch-up calls with Megan, she told me that Jake and Sarah had been trying to have kids. They just weren't telling anyone. Yeah, apparently they had been trying for over a year, doing the whole fertility specialist thing, and the news wasn't good. Jake had some kind of condition, Megan didn't know all the details, that made it almost impossible for him to have biological children. Sarah was fine medically. It was all on Jake's side. And here's where it gets messy. Jake and Sarah didn't tell my parents right away. Honestly, I get it. Knowing my mom and dad, they wouldn't have been supportive or understanding. They would have been disappointed, and not the aw shucks kind of disappointed. The kind where they make you feel like you've personally let them down and disgraced the entire family. Jake and Sarah kept it under wraps for a while, but secrets like that don't stay hidden forever, especially in our family. My parents were relentless about the whole grandchild thing. Every time they saw Jake and Sarah, they'd drop comments about when they were going to have kids. Not if, always when. Megan told me it all came to a head during a family dinner. My mom was doing her usual thing, grilling Sarah about babies, saying stuff like, "Oh, you're not getting any younger," and "You should really think about starting now before it's too late." Sarah finally snapped and said something like, "It's not that simple, okay?" That's when the truth came out. She spilled everything. The fertility issues, the specialist visits, all of it. My parents' reaction? About as bad as you'd expect. Megan said they didn't even try to comfort Jake or Sarah. My mom just sat there looking like someone had told her Christmas was canceled. And my dad muttered something about how they should have told them sooner. Real supportive, right? After that, things got weird. My parents didn't come right out and say they were mad at Jake, but you could tell they were. The way Megan described it, it was like a switch flipped. My mom stopped calling Jake every day, and my dad didn't swing by their house as often. They still doted on Sarah, probably because they saw her as their last hope for grandkids, but Jake? Not so much. Megan said my mom started making passive-aggressive comments about adoption like, "Well, I guess it's better than nothing," and "It's not the same, though, is it?" She'd go on and on about how their friends were all real grandparents with real grandkids. My dad, on the other hand, kept talking about how Jake needed to figure it out. Like, what was he supposed to do? Snap his fingers and magically fix his infertility? Jake, for once in his life, didn't know how to handle the pressure. He'd spent his whole life being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Now, suddenly, he wasn't living up to their expectations, and it was eating him alive. Megan told me Jake started acting out in ways that weren't like him. He was snapping at Sarah, picking fights over stupid things, and even lashing out at my parents during family gatherings. He'd always been good at staying on their good side, but now he was struggling to keep it together. Sarah wasn't handling it much better. Megan said she was tired of being treated like a baby-making machine. She started avoiding family events altogether, and when she did show up, she barely spoke to anyone. It was obvious she was over it. One night, Megan called me with an update that really drove home how bad things had gotten. Apparently, Jake had a meltdown at another family dinner. Are we noticing a pattern here? My mom had made some comment about how disappointing it was that she might never have biological grandkids, and Jake just lost it. He told them they were being selfish, and that this wasn't something he could control. Megan said my parents were stunned. My mom tried to guilt trip him, saying stuff like, "We're only thinking about the family," and "Do you know how much this means to us?" But Jake wasn't having it. He stormed out, and Sarah followed him. Here's the thing. Part of me felt bad for Jake. Infertility isn't something anyone chooses, and the way my parents reacted was awful. But another part of me? I couldn't help but think he was finally getting a taste of what it was like to be on the other side of their impossible expectations. He'd never had to deal with their disapproval or their guilt trips, because he could do no wrong in their eyes. Now he was learning what it felt like to not measure up, and it was clearly breaking him. Megan told me my parents started putting more pressure on Sarah after that. They were still hung up on the idea of biological grandkids, and they didn't care how it happened. They kept pushing for solutions that were completely unrealistic, like expensive treatments that Jake and Sarah couldn't afford without help. The whole thing became this toxic cycle. My parents would pressure Jake and Sarah, they'd push back, and then my parents would double down. It was like no one could admit that maybe, just maybe, things weren't going to turn out the way they wanted. I felt bad for Sarah. She didn't sign up for this level of crazy when she married Jake. On the other hand, I couldn't feel too sorry for him. After a while, my parents were furious and threatened to cut Jake off financially unless he could fix the situation. And of course, Jake can't afford living without their help. He's been almost completely dependent on them. And because my parents are all about bloodlines and family legacy, their brilliant solution was for Jake to come crawling to me. They wanted him to convince me to give my unborn baby their last name. Not just my baby, their legacy. The audacity, right? Megan called me one night, and I could hear the tension in her voice. "Emily," she said, "Jake's desperate. They're putting so much pressure on him, and now he's coming for you. Be careful." Sure enough, a couple of days later, Jake showed up unannounced at my house in California. Let me tell you, seeing him on my doorstep was surreal. He looked nothing like the smug, arrogant brother I remembered. Instead, he looked tired and defeated, like life had finally smacked him in the face. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He started rambling right away, launching into this sob story about how hard things had been since our parents found out about his infertility. He said they'd been relentless, blaming him for ruining their dreams of grandkids and threatening to cut him off if he didn't make it right. Jake tried to blame everything: his behavior growing up, his role in turning my parents against me, on stress. He said he'd been under so much pressure to be the perfect son that he didn't know how to handle it. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, wiping his eyes dramatically. I just didn't know how else to deal with everything. Honestly, I wasn't buying it. Jake's actions weren't about stress. They were about control. He'd spent years making my life hell because he could, because he knew our parents would always take his side. And now he wanted me to swoop in and save him? Yeah, no. I let him talk until he finally got to the real reason he was there. Emily, he said, I need your help. Mom and Dad are serious about cutting me off unless I can fix this. They need the family name to continue, and they think your baby is the answer. Please, just give the baby our last name. It's the only way to save our family. I couldn't help it. I laughed, like actually laughed out loud. Jake, I said, you've got to be kidding me. After everything you did to me, you want me to hand over my child to fix your mess? Not a chance. Jake looked stunned, like he genuinely thought I'd say yes. He tried to guilt trip me, accusing me of being petty and holding grudges. This isn't about the past, I told him. This is about protecting my family. My kids will have nothing to do with the people who treated me like I didn't matter. He kept pushing, saying how I was ruining his life by refusing to help him. He even tried to play the victim, saying he didn't deserve to be punished for something he couldn't control. Emily, he said, if they cut me off, I'll lose everything. That's when I lost my patience. Jake, I said, you've spent your whole life taking from me, my peace, my friends, even my parents' attention. And now you want to take from my kids? Absolutely not. If they cut you off, that's on them, not me. Maybe it's time you learned what it's like to stand on your own 2 feet. Jake stormed out after that, slamming the door behind him. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, relief, and a weird sense of closure. For the first time, I stood up to him and didn't let him manipulate me. It felt good. A few days later, Megan called me with an update. Apparently, my parents followed through on their threat and cut Jake off financially. They stopped paying for his house, his car, and everything else they'd been covering for him. Megan said Jake and Sarah were struggling to adjust to life without my parents' endless support. Sarah, who'd been used to living a cushy life, wasn't happy. Megan said she overheard Sarah complaining about how unfair it was that Jake couldn't just fix things with me. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered how she'd gone along with my parents' toxic behavior for years. So, after Jake failed to get me to cave, my parents decided to step in themselves. I wasn't exactly surprised. It started with a phone call from my mom. I hadn't heard from her in years, literally years. So seeing her name pop up on my screen was jarring, to say the least. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but I was curious to see what she had to say. I picked up, and she immediately launched into a rehearsed-sounding apology. Emily, she said, her voice dripping with this faux sweetness that I hadn't heard since I was a kid. I just wanted to say how sorry I am for everything. We've been thinking about you so much, and we miss you. Miss me? Since when? She kept going, trying to make it sound like they'd had this big epiphany about how they'd treated me. I know we made mistakes, she said, but we're family, and I think it's time we start fresh. I cut her off. Is this about Jake? There was a long pause on the other end. She clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct. Well, yes, she admitted, her tone shifting. But it's not just about him. It's about the family. We need to come together, Emily. We've all been through so much. And then she started with the guilt trips. You know how much this means to your father and me. All we want is to make things right. Your baby could bring this family back together. Don't you think it's time we put the past behind us? I could feel my blood boiling. Put the past behind us, I said. You mean the past where you treated me like I didn't exist? The past where you gave Jake everything and left me with nothing? That past? She tried to backpedal, but I wasn't having it. I told her I wasn't interested in letting them use my child to fix their mistakes. She started crying, saying how much it hurt her to hear me talk that way, but I stood my ground. A few days later, my dad called. If my mom's tactic was guilt, my dad's was anger. He started off by saying how disappointed he was in me for being so selfish. He told me I was tearing the family apart, and that I needed to grow up and think about the bigger picture. I let him rant for a while before cutting in. Dad, let me make one thing clear. My baby is not your second chance. If you're so worried about the family name, maybe you should have thought about that earlier. Way earlier. He didn't have much to say after that, but he tried one last jab. You know, Emily, we only want what's best for the family. If you can't see that, then I don't know what else to say. I had enough and blocked them everywhere, and I haven't heard from them since. Meanwhile, I'm focusing on my life and what's coming. Ethan and I will be raising our kids in a loving, healthy environment, something I never had growing up. Megan and Ethan's family have become my support system, and I couldn't be more grateful for them. I've thought a lot about whether I should feel guilty for cutting off my family, especially Jake. But every time I think about it, I come back to the same conclusion. I don't owe them anything. They made their choices, and now they're dealing with the consequences. Jake and my parents can keep playing their games, but I'm done. I'm done being the scapegoat, the afterthought, the one who always had to bend to make them happy. I'm building a new life, one filled with love, respect, and the kind of family I always wanted, but never had. Thanks for sticking with me through this story, Reddit. It's been a wild ride, but sharing it has been surprisingly cathartic. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from the people who hurt you, no matter who they are. Story 5. My parents sabotaged my scholarship interview to protect my brother's ego, then called me ungrateful when I moved out. Years later, they demanded my success fund his business and tried to blackmail me into coming home. So I brought proof and left the meltdown in front of everyone. Hey, Reddit! My family spent my whole life treating my brother like royalty and me like the extra. So I packed up, walked out, and started building something on my own. But apparently, cutting them off wasn't enough. They had other plans. Before we get into that mess, let me start from the beginning. I'm Nolan Hale. I'm 24 now, and it's been 6 years since I walked out of the bedroom I grew up in. Back then, I thought leaving was the hardest part. Turns out, staying gone was the real test. My dad Richard runs the family like a board meeting. My mom Elaine lives for what the neighbors think. And my brother Oliver, 2 years older, is the golden boy they call Dr. Hale, even though he dropped out of med school after his first year. I've always been the quiet one. I make short films with a secondhand camera and a laptop that barely works. It's not a hobby to me, but Dad calls it that. If it doesn't come with a paycheck, it's a waste of time to him. Mom says I'm too sensitive. Oliver calls it playing pretend. For 6 months, I'd been preparing for a national film scholarship. Industry mentors, funding, real projects. I'd shot 2 short films and had an interview lined up for Thursday night. I'd arranged time off work and borrowed a jacket to look presentable. 3 days before the interview, Dad brought up a family obligation at dinner. The logistics company was sponsoring a banquet in Oliver's name. Apparently, his research project, which was really just a summer internship, was being recognized. They'd booked tables, invited old colleagues, the works. The banquet, same night as my interview. I told them I couldn't make it. Dad put his fork down and gave me that look like I'd just insulted him. Family comes first, he said. This scholarship could set up my career, I said back. Career? He laughed. You mean your editing? Nolan, be serious. You'll have plenty of chances to talk about your little videos. Mom chimed in about how it would look bad if I skipped. Oliver just smirked and said, it's not like anyone will miss you there. I tried to argue, but there's no point when Dad decides something. If you don't agree, you're selfish. If you push back, you're ungrateful. So I showed up at that stupid banquet, clapping along while Oliver gave a speech about future medical breakthroughs and listening to Dad brag about his 2 successful sons to people who didn't know the truth. I missed the interview. No reschedules, no second chances. I emailed them begging for another chance. They replied 3 days later. They'd already moved forward with other candidates. 6 months of work, gone. A week later, I saw a post online. Oliver had submitted a short film to a regional contest. It won first place. The screenshots looked familiar, so I downloaded the video. It wasn't just familiar, it was mine. Same shots, same edits, even the original file names in the metadata. He'd taken my entire scholarship project, tweaked the opening credits, and put his name on it. The contest was small, maybe 40 submissions from a local business group. Nobody there knew about my scholarship application. Perfect place for him to steal it without getting caught. I confronted him in the kitchen. You stole my work. He barely looked up from his phone. If it was really yours, they'd know. Guess they thought it was mine. You had no right. Don't be dramatic, Nolan. It's just a video. You should be happy it won something. I turned to Mom and Dad, expecting some kind of reaction. Dad folded his newspaper like I was interrupting something important. Oliver's been under a lot of pressure, he said. It's good for him to get a win. And you, Mom added, should learn to share. This family supports each other. Share? It was the hours I spent filming after midnight. The editing I did while my hands shook from too much caffeine. The stories I wanted to tell. And they were calling it sharing. I walked to my room and sat on the floor staring at my hard drive. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was how things had always been. By the time the sun came up, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to do it again. I wasn't going to beg for them to see me. If they wanted Oliver to be the only son worth anything, fine. They could have him. I was done. I left that house the same night. I didn't slam doors or yell, I just packed a camera bag, a duffel with clothes, my hard drive, and the laptop. That was it. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. Don't wait up. I'm done. And walked out without looking back. The first 2 nights I crashed on a coworker's couch. It was cramped and awkward, but I didn't care. It was still better than sleeping under the same roof as people who treated me like I was nothing. On the 3rd day, I found a listing for a tiny apartment on the east side. It was a rundown 2-bedroom with peeling paint, a leaky faucet, and paper-thin walls. But the rent was low enough that I could afford it if I kept working. The other room was already taken by a guy named Luke Carter. Luke was 28, a couple of years older than Oliver. He used to run a small tech startup, but his uncle pushed him out when it started doing well. He told me that on the first night over takeout boxes and cheap pizza, family will screw you faster than strangers, he said. Not bitter, just stating it like a fact. We clicked right away. Luke was blunt, sarcastic, and had this calm way of talking about things that made them feel less overwhelming. Over time, he became more like the older brother I wished I'd had, the kind who gives real advice and doesn't treat you like a punchline. Life got busy fast. I picked up a morning job at a small coffee shop near the apartment, then did evening shifts delivering food. Most nights, I came home past midnight, grabbed a quick shower, and worked on videos until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I started a film channel under a fake name and posted weekly. First video got 60 views, then 112, then 74. Luke gave me notes on pacing when we watched them together. A few weeks after I moved out, Aunt Linda called. She was the only one in the family who ever treated me like I was more than Oliver's shadow. I heard you left, she said gently. I'm proud of you, Nolan. It was 2 sentences, but it meant more than any fake, we're proud text my parents ever sent. She asked if I needed anything. I told her no, not because I didn't, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could figure it out on my own. The first months were rough. Rent ate my paycheck. I lived on instant noodles. My editing setup barely worked. But it was mine, it was quiet, and no one told me I was wasting my time. Then, something changed. I made a short called Night Shift. It followed a janitor, a nurse, and a delivery driver working through the night in the same city, but never crossing paths. It was simple, raw, and honest. I posted it like usual and forgot about it. A week later, I got an email from the city's Arts Council. Someone on their panel had seen Night Shift and shared it internally. They wanted to award me a small arts grant and pair me with a mentor at a local film incubator. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes. The grant covered gear and rent, but the mentorship was the real prize. Access to professional editors and real feedback. When I told Luke, he grinned like he'd won the lottery. This is it, man, he said. This is how it starts. Aunt Linda cried when I called her. I knew you'd make something of yourself, she said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. The grant was $8,000 over 6 months. Half went to rent and bills. The rest went to basic gear upgrades and festival fees. Not luxury money, just breathing room. For the first time, I felt like things might actually go somewhere. I wasn't just chasing something. I was catching it. A week after my short film started getting some attention, my mom texted me out of nowhere. We're so proud of you. Come home soon. It felt fake. Too smooth. Too cheerful. I ignored it. 2 days later, Dad followed with, it's time to come home and do something useful with your life. That one made me laugh. Useful to him always meant something that benefits Oliver. I didn't reply. I found out later how they even knew about any of it. Aunt Linda had shared one of my short films on Facebook, just trying to be supportive, and Mom saw it. That's how she learned about the grant, the incubator mentorship, and everything else I was working toward. I guess she told Oliver because not long after, things started to go sideways. The first hit came in the form of an email. We've received an anonymous complaint regarding your financial disclosures. Your grant will be paused pending review. It was from the Arts Council. Apparently, someone had reported me for lying on my application and misusing funds. They wouldn't say who, but I didn't have to guess. I sent them every invoice, receipt, and transaction I had, but the money was frozen until they finished reviewing. Then came the next blow. A video started circulating on social media, an edited clip that made it look like I'd admitted to stealing footage from another filmmaker. It was a sloppy cut-up of sentences from different behind-the-scenes videos I'd posted. The voice was mine, but the message wasn't. I figured no one would take it seriously. I was wrong. The comments were brutal. Fraud. Scammer. Fake. Sponsors ghosted me. A gear company suddenly pulled their offer. Someone was tanking my reputation. A few days later, a friend from the incubator sent me a link to a film festival's submission list. I scrolled down and froze. There it was. My concept, my script, even the working title, submitted under Oliver's name. He'd taken another unfinished project from my shared cloud folder and submitted it before I could. I was furious. Luke tried to calm me down. "You're not going to win this by reacting," he said. "That's what he wants. You need to think bigger." I knew he was right, but it still made me sick. Then everything escalated. I came home from a delivery shift one night and saw our apartment door slightly open. Inside was chaos. My editing setup was trashed, drawers were emptied, memory cards gone, camera lenses shattered. On my desk was a piece of paper with 4 words in thick black marker: "Stay in your lane." I called the police. They came, took photos, got my statement. No forced entry, no witnesses, no evidence of who did it. "Without proof," one cop said. "Especially if it's family, this is tough to pursue." The next morning, Luke found a camera wedged near the window, pointing into our living room. We'd been watched for weeks. The camera felt calculated, hidden carefully, covered in dust like it had been there a while. But the break-in felt different, angry, sloppy. My guess? Oliver planted the camera when he thought he was being smart. The break-in happened when he lost control. That changed everything. It wasn't jealousy anymore. This was deliberate, planned. Someone, and we both knew who, was trying to scare me into quitting. And for a while, it almost worked. I stopped uploading. I'd sit at my desk and stare at my blank timeline without touching a thing. My drive to work on anything evaporated. A part of me even thought about deleting the channel, selling my gear, and finding a job that didn't make me a target. But every time I considered giving up, I thought about that note. Stay in your lane. That's what they wanted. For me to shrink back down and disappear so Oliver could keep pretending I didn't matter. One night, Luke walked into my room holding 2 coffees. "If you're gonna quit, do it because you want to," he said. "Not because some spoiled idiot smashed your stuff." He was right. I wasn't going to hand them that win. The next morning, I opened a new project file and typed the title, Negative Space. This wasn't going to be another short film. It would be a full documentary, not just about me, but about people who'd had their work stolen, their names dragged, their reputations trashed. People who were told to stay in their lane. I started outlining interviews, scripting voiceovers, and piecing together the story. Every message, every screenshot, every suspicious upload. I started cataloging it all. I quit the delivery job and kept the coffee shop. Luke covered part of my rent for a few months. The documentary took 4 months. Filming on weekends, editing after shifts, all-nighters twice a week. My mentor let me use the incubator's studio and software. Without that, my laptop would have died halfway through. Because I wasn't staying in the lane he built anymore. I was paving my own. The first thing Luke said when I told him about the documentary idea was, "If you're going to do this, do it smart. No angry rants, no half-baked evidence. You need receipts for everything." And that's exactly where we started. We spent the next few nights turning my mess into a plan. Luke helped me organize every piece of proof I already had. Screenshots of the fake video posts, timestamps from when Oliver uploaded stolen footage, emails from the grant committee, and text messages from my parents that tried to guilt me into coming home. We created a timeline, line by line, from the night I left my parents' house to the vandalism in my apartment. We upgraded security first. Luke installed a better lock and motion sensors. We also backed up all my work on encrypted drives. One stayed hidden in the apartment, another went to Aunt Linda's place. She offered to keep it safe without asking too many questions. She was the only one who didn't need the full story to understand why I didn't trust anyone else. Luke traced the anonymous tip email to my hometown. We combed through metadata on the stolen files. They still had my original creation dates. The most surprising evidence came from Aunt Linda. She was looking through old family photos on the shared cloud everyone forgot about. She found a folder labeled N Projects, drafts of posts attacking me, the fake video files, even a document called Reputation Management Strategy. Oliver had used it as backup and never cleaned it out. Kept all the evidence because he never thought he'd get caught. I reached out to the mentor from the incubator, who had offered guidance when I won the grant. I explained what was happening without giving too many details and asked for advice. She told me to talk to a lawyer who specialized in creative property and digital rights. She even recommended one. He worked on contingency for the IP theft. No upfront cost. For everything else, I paid $200 a month. Luke kicked in $800 for filing fees and told me to shut up when I tried to pay him back. The lawyer's advice was simple. Don't go public yet. The more you talk online, the more they can twist. Build your case quietly. Then when you move once, and hard. He helped me start a formal process for a demand letter against Oliver for intellectual property theft and defamation. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was the first legal step. I started filming negative space. Not me crying, but how this happens to anyone building something. I filmed night shifts, interviewed other creators who'd been plagiarized, and captured my empty desk where the broken gear used to sit. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't even polished, but it was honest. And that was the point. I posted a 3-minute preview, break-in clips, screenshots, a voiceover about envy. A film blog picked it up. Views jumped from hundreds to tens of thousands. The attention brought new opportunities. A small documentary collective reached out to offer feedback. They even asked if I'd consider submitting negative space to a festival they partnered with. I wasn't ready yet, but I thanked them. The idea of my story reaching a real audience made me work harder. The documentary collective waived my submission fee through a festival partnership. Without that, I couldn't have afforded the $75 entry. Then came the email I wasn't expecting. A major independent film festival accepted negative space for its upcoming showcase. I stared at the message for a full minute before I believed it. My first feature-length project, born from sabotage and anger, was going to screen in front of real critics and industry people. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, because just a few hours after that email arrived, I got another one from my mom. We're hosting a family dinner this weekend. Your father says we can help repair your reputation if you're willing to be reasonable. A separate message from Dad followed. We can fix this. Let's talk like adults. There was no apology. No mention of the vandalism, the theft, the lies. Just another attempt to make me feel like I needed them. I showed the text to Luke. He raised an eyebrow. They're scared, he said, and they're trying to pull you back in before you do something they can't control. I agreed to go, but not for reconciliation. I wanted information. I wanted their words recorded. Luke and I planned it out. I'd wear a small recorder in my pocket, and he'd sit in the car outside with a laptop marking timestamps as I texted him coded messages. The plan wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about being prepared. By the time dinner day arrived, negative space was deep in production. I had hours of footage, more evidence than I'd ever imagined, and a legal path starting to form. For the first time since leaving home, I didn't feel powerless. And this dinner wasn't going to change that. They thought they were pulling me back under their control. What they didn't know was that I was finally ready to expose everything, and I wasn't going to do it with yelling or revenge posts. I was going to do it with proof. I showed up to the dinner at my parents' house on a cold Sunday evening. I hadn't been there since the night I left, and it felt strange standing on the same front porch I used to race up as a kid. Mom opened the door before I could even knock. "Nolan," she said, smiling like we were long-lost friends. She pulled me into a hug that lasted too long and felt fake from start to finish. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. My old photo from middle school still hung in the hallway, crooked and forgotten, like they'd never noticed it was tilted. Dinner was already set. A long table covered with too many dishes for 4 people. Dad sat at the head of the table with a glass of water, scrolling through his phone. Oliver leaned back in his chair, phone in hand too, acting bored like he was doing me a favor by even being there. "Glad you could finally make time for family," Dad said without looking up. "Glad you invited me," I said, keeping my voice even. The small talk started right away. Questions about my little videos, comments about how I must be busy with all my online stuff. It was their way of downplaying everything without sounding obvious. I didn't bite. I answered each question calmly and kept my tone neutral. I knew every word mattered now, and I wanted them all on record. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and set his phone down. "Let's talk about why we're really here," he said. "Your mother and I think it's time you started thinking about the future, about the family's future." I almost laughed. "And what exactly does that mean?" Mom leaned forward, folding her hands. "Oliver is starting a medical consulting practice," she said, as if the words were sacred. "It's an exciting opportunity, but he can't do it alone. We were thinking, maybe you could partner with him. Partner how? I asked, though I already knew. You have a platform, Dad said. A growing one. You could handle marketing, media, outreach, all that stuff you're good at. And in return, you'd be part of something bigger than your online projects. For years, they called my work a hobby. Now that Oliver needed help and I had an audience, suddenly it was a valuable skill. They didn't respect what I did, they just saw something they could use. Oliver smirked. And let's be honest, Nolan, that whole plagiarism scandal and grant thing didn't do your reputation any favors. Partnering with me could help clean that up. I stared at him. You mean the plagiarism scandal you caused? He shrugged like it was nothing. Water under the bridge. People forget things, but they don't forget when you're connected to someone successful. I took a slow breath. So let me get this straight. You want me to use my work and name to boost Oliver's business so I can fix a problem he created? Mom jumped in quickly. This is a chance to put the past behind us. We're family, Nolan. Families help each other. I kept my voice steady. When I was struggling to pay rent, where was that help? When my work was stolen, where was the help then? Dad frowned. You're being dramatic. We've always supported you. We gave you everything you needed. You gave Oliver everything, I said, and you blamed me for being upset about it. The room went quiet for a moment. Mom tried to recover with a softer tone. We're trying to build a bridge here. Don't ruin it with bitterness. I leaned back in my chair. Bitterness isn't the problem. Reality is. That's when Dad slid a folder across the table. We had a draft agreement drawn up, he said. Just a basic family partnership document. Read it over. I opened it. The terms were vague and one-sided. It gave Oliver control over branding, content, and revenue decisions. My name was mentioned once, under marketing support. It was a joke. I closed the folder. I'll look at it, I said flatly, slipping it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't signing anything, but I wanted the document. It could be useful later. As we wrapped up dinner, Oliver followed me to the hallway while I was putting on my coat. You're not as important as you think you are, he said quietly. You can't win without us. I met his eyes. We'll see. He smiled that same smug smile he'd worn my entire life. Good luck with your little film thing. Hope it works out. Outside, the air felt colder than when I arrived. Luke was parked down the block, waiting in the car with his laptop open. I slid into the passenger seat and handed him a small piece of paper with a timestamp on it. He nodded. Every significant part of that conversation was recorded and marked. How'd it go? He asked. They want me to build Oliver's business for him, I said. And they think I owe them for everything they've done. Luke snorted. That's not surprising. But we got what we needed. Every word, I said. That night, I uploaded the audio files to an encrypted folder and sent a backup to the lawyer. I didn't feel satisfied or victorious. If anything, I felt numb. But I knew one thing for sure. They weren't trying to make peace. They were trying to pull me back under their control before I got too far away from them. And they still didn't understand. That control was gone. They just didn't know it yet. The day of the film festival felt like the biggest day of my life, and the scariest. Negative Space was finally finished. Luke and I arrived early. He helped me set up the small booth they gave us in the networking area. I printed a simple flyer. Negative Space. A story about betrayal, ownership, and building something from nothing. Nothing fancy. I just wanted people to understand what it felt like to be stepped on and still keep building. The screening was in one of the mid-sized auditoriums, and to my surprise, it was almost full. A few students, some local filmmakers, a handful of critics, even a couple of producers I recognized from YouTube projects I'd followed. I sat near the back with Luke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The lights dimmed, and the opening scene played. A shot of my broken desk, memory cards scattered on the floor, that note taped to the wall, stay in your lane. Then came interviews. A musician whose song was stolen and re-released under a label's name. A photographer whose work was reposted thousands of times without credit. A designer whose brother claimed his portfolio as his own. And woven between their stories was mine. Not exaggerated, not dramatized, just facts, supported with emails, screenshots, timestamps, and video evidence. When the credits rolled, there was silence. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite clapping, but the kind that grows louder because people mean it. A couple of folks stood up. Someone yelled, "That was incredible!" I just sat there frozen, trying to process it. Afterward, people came up to talk. A small indie studio asked if I'd consider expanding Negative Space into a series. A journalist from an online film magazine asked if they could interview me. Even a documentary festival coordinator handed me a card and said, "We'd love to feature this next year." It was overwhelming, in the best way. Then, as Luke and I were packing up, I saw them. My parents. Oliver. Standing by the exit, watching the crowd around me. My stomach turned. Of course they showed up. Of course they couldn't just stay away. Mom was the first to speak. "We saw your film," she said. "It was intense." "Honest," I corrected. Dad crossed his arms. "You made us look like monsters." "I didn't make you look like anything." I showed what happened. Oliver stepped forward. "You could have handled this privately." I laughed once. "You made fake videos about me, broke into my place, and stole my work. You don't get to lecture me about private." He flinched, but didn't back down. "You're not going to get away with this." "Get away with what? Telling the truth?" That's when Dad tried a different tactic. "You've embarrassed this family. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" "Yeah," I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. "That's the point." I walked away before they could say anything else. I didn't owe them a debate. The article about the film dropped 2 days later. It went viral on social media. The brutally honest documentary everyone should watch. It wasn't trending numbers, but it was everywhere in the creative community. Not mainstream viral. The average person had no idea who I was. But in indie film circles and creative spaces where Oliver was trying to build a career, his name was toast. My parents didn't get it. They thought they still had leverage because the documentary hadn't reached their social circle. They didn't realize the game had already changed. The message hit people hard. I got emails from strangers thanking me for saying what they couldn't. A few even shared their own stories of family members or companies stealing their work. I didn't hear from Oliver for months. Aunt Linda said he tried claiming I edited things out of context, but other people he'd screwed over started coming forward. His name became a joke in creative circles. She told me he threw a glass at a family dinner and screamed that I'd ruined his life. Dad had the stroke a few weeks after that. The attention brought more than just praise. The lawyer called me to say our case had gotten stronger. The stolen footage, the fake plagiarism claims, the vandalism, the messages, it was all now part of an official civil suit. Oliver was being served. And because my parents had defended and enabled him, they were being named too. The fallout was immediate. Oliver's film festival submission was disqualified after the organizers saw the evidence. The medical consulting practice he'd been planning suddenly lost investors. Even a clinic he'd been trying to partner with backed out. Word travels fast when you're caught lying. Then came the message I never expected. Aunt Linda texted me. "Your mom called. They're panicking. They want to talk before the lawsuit goes any further." I ignored it. A few hours later, Dad called. Then Mom. Then Oliver. I let every call go to voicemail. If they wanted to talk, they could do it through lawyers now. One night, about a week after the festival, I was working on a new project when Luke walked into the room with a grin. "You're not going to believe this," he said, tossing his phone on the desk. It was a news article. "Viral documentary inspires new funding for creative rights initiative." A nonprofit had launched a grant to help small creators fight legal battles over stolen work, and they credited Negative Space as the inspiration. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing that something I made in a tiny apartment with borrowed gear was now sparking real change. Of course, my parents tried one last trick. A long, carefully written email showed up a few days later. "We're sorry for how things turned out. We never meant to hurt you. Can we meet and talk about this?" I read it once and deleted it, because the truth was, I didn't need them to understand anymore. I didn't need them to see my side or feel guilty. The damage was done, and now they had to live with the consequences, just like I had to live with theirs. The night before the lawsuit papers were officially filed, Luke and I stood on the balcony of our apartment. The city buzzed below us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. "This is just the start," he said. "Yeah," I replied, watching the lights in the distance. But this time, I'm writing the story. The lawsuit was moving forward, slow but steady. Oliver's lawyer tried to settle twice, both times with insulting offers that basically said, "Let's pretend none of this happened." My lawyer rejected both. We weren't after a payout. We wanted accountability. The civil suit for defamation, theft of intellectual property, and property damage was strong. The digital forensics, the emails, the break-in evidence, the fake videos, it was airtight. Their defense strategy was basically, "He's exaggerating," and that wasn't going to hold up. Then, one rainy night in late November, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Oliver was standing there, soaking wet, looking nothing like the arrogant version of himself I'd grown up with. He'd lost weight. His hands shook. This wasn't the same guy. This was someone who'd finally realized he put himself at rock bottom. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his face looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, but stepped aside. He walked in slowly, scanning the place like he was searching for the version of me he used to know. I offered him a towel. He didn't take it. "Dad's been sick," he said after a long pause. "Stroke. Not too bad, but he's not the same. Mom's. She's not handling it well." I nodded. "I heard." He rubbed his face. "Everything's falling apart. Investors bailed. My name's trashed. Nobody wants to work with me. I can't even get interviews because every search result is about your documentary or the lawsuit." I leaned against the counter. "That's what happens when you spend your whole life thinking you're untouchable." He flinched. "I know I screwed up." "Screwed up?" I said, my voice low but steady. "You didn't just screw up, Oliver. You tried to destroy me. You broke into my home. You spread lies. You stole my work. You watched me through a camera. And you never once thought you were wrong." He didn't argue. He just stood there, eyes red, staring at the floor. "I thought I was supposed to be the successful one," he whispered. "That's what they always told me. If you started doing better than me, then what was I?" I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe he didn't either. After a long silence, he finally said, "I'm sorry. Not because of the lawsuit, or because my life's falling apart. I'm sorry, because I treated you like you were less than me. You never were." For a second, I almost believed it. But part of me also knew this was probably too late. You don't undo years of damage with one apology. Still, hearing it mattered. Not for him, but for me. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "But sorry doesn't erase what you did, and it doesn't mean I'll drop the lawsuit." He nodded. "I know. I'm not asking you to." We stood there for a while, the rain hitting the windows, neither of us really knowing what to say. Before he left, he turned to me one last time. "I'm leaving town, starting over somewhere else. I don't think anyone here will ever forget what I did." "Maybe that's a good thing," I said. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. I never saw him again after that night. Aunt Linda told me later that he moved to another state and was working under a different name. I didn't feel happy or angry, just done. Like that part of my life was finally sealed shut. The lawsuit wrapped up a few months later. We won. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. Oliver and my parents had to pay damages, issue a public apology, and remove any remaining false content. More importantly, there was now a permanent legal record of what happened, something they couldn't rewrite or deny. Life after that felt lighter. I released another project, a short series exploring creative ownership in the digital age, and it gained even more traction than Negative Space. My following grew, and so did the opportunities. I was invited to speak on panels, collaborate with other filmmakers, and mentor younger creators who'd been through similar situations. Every time someone told me, "Your story made me keep going," I remembered all the nights I almost gave up. 5 years after Negative Space first screened, I held a small gathering in my studio. Just a handful of close friends, Luke, Aunt Linda, and a few people I'd met along the way. We ordered takeout, drank coffee, and watched the film together. Near the end, Luke raised his glass and said, "To staying out of lanes." We all laughed, but I knew what he meant. I'd spent most of my life being told where I did and didn't belong. And now, finally, I was living entirely on my own terms. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked out over the city. It was quiet, just the faint hum of traffic below. I thought about the scared 18-year-old kid who left home with a backpack and $1,200. I thought about the smashed camera gear, the fake videos, the betrayal, and every single time someone told me I wasn't enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I remembered it. I felt grateful, because if they hadn't tried to break me, I never would have learned how strong I was. If they hadn't taken everything, I never would have built something that was truly mine. And standing there, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won. They had to live with what they'd done. I got to live with what I'd built. And that was more than enough. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Story 6. My soon-to-be ex-wife and I began dating when we were both 16, but knew each other since middle school. I would say that our relationship back then was strong. We were the type of kids that avoided any situation with too much conflict, so we did our best to be understanding of one another. There was nothing in our 8 years of dating that stuck out to me as potential affairs. We never had breaks, and we went to the same university. If she cheated during that time period, the only way I would know would be a confession. I'm not going to wait for one. We went on to work in the same company after graduation, but in separate fields. I knew what her schedule was and she knew mine. We would even meet whenever we had spare time for lunch. We then got married in June 2008 and shortly after my mother passed away. It was in a car accident. I cut my honeymoon short to attend her funeral, and my soon-to-be ex-wife was supportive of me at the time. She would take care of everything while I grieved for my mother with my father. The house, the bills, therapy sessions, emotional support. She did everything a person could. That was who I saw as my wife. Whoever she is now, I have no idea. I struggled with depression and nearly lost my career. If it hadn't been for my father and her, I don't think I would have ever recovered. I came out of it with the knowledge that my loved ones would have wanted me to be better. So I worked 3 times harder to advance in my career. I wanted to be able to support a family that my father could spoil as a grandfather. My soon-to-be ex-wife, while also advancing in her career, seemed shocked at my drive. I recall her saying that she didn't think she could keep up with me and that she was worried I would leave her behind. Perhaps she developed an insecurity there. I was able to build enough capital to purchase a good house, and we began trying for a baby in 2012. It was during this period that she cheated on me. There was no indication that she was cheating on me. No drop in sex drive. No hiding text messages on her phone. Not even a single mention of any new friends. I had no clues whatsoever. As far as I knew at the time, our efforts were paying off. So once my twins were born, I had everything I dreamed of. A loving wife, children to adore, and my father's chance to spoil them. He was so happy, loved them with all his heart. He passed away only 2 years ago, practically thanking me with tears for being his son. I don't even want to know what would have happened had he been here to witness all this. As time went on, there would be cracks showing my soon-to-be ex-wife's narrative in every argument. Since then, she would call the twins. My twins accused me of flirting with coworkers or grill me on what kind of women I preferred, even though she already knew what seemed to be small issues to me in hindsight, were red flags that pointed to her having had an affair. So now quarantine hit, and we're both, thankfully enough, able to work from home, albeit with a hit to our salaries. My soon-to-be ex-wife had mentioned that she had taken an ancestry test in the past, and I was hopeful that I could find distant relatives to connect with. I wanted to map out a complete family tree to show off to the twins, and even planned a scavenger hunt around it. Needless to say, when I pitched the idea to my soon-to-be ex-wife, she panicked, told me that was the stupidest idea she had ever heard, and that I already had the family I wanted. What if the relatives I found were dangerous, or even criminals? She was grasping at straws to dissuade me from taking that test. I could feel this drop in my gut. That wouldn't go away. Why would she be so against my finding family members, especially now that I have none left breathing? So I secretly had my twins, and I take the test and took them for treats afterwards to buy their silence. Waiting for the results was hell on earth. My soon-to-be ex-wife seemed to catch my unease and tried to distract me with sex, meals, and date nights. I also had the stress of making sure my twins wouldn't mention the test to her, so I bought them a Nintendo Switch to preoccupy them. They had been begging for one, so I was hoping that would be enough. Once the results came in last week, I saw I wasn't even considered a close match to them. The closest I found to their biological parents was my soon-to-be ex-wife, and some name I didn't recognize. I nearly vomited right then and there. I had to get out of there, so I waited until my soon-to-be ex-wife left on a run. I packed up, told my twins I was going on a work trip, and called a work colleague to help me find a place to stay. He was kind enough to let me stay with him until I was back on my feet. I took leave from work and spent nearly 2 days just crying and cursing my soon-to-be ex-wife. She would call and text nearly non-stop until I told her that I knew about the twins and muted her. Then I got angry. I had to find the home and make him understand what he did to my family. He was extremely prevalent on social media, so I knew his face now, and I recognized a park outside his apartment window in a specific post. From what I could tell, he was single and never was married. I then waited in that park the next day and was lucky enough to catch him while he was on a jog. He looked so much like me, just with a longer face and thinner hair. I called his name and asked him if he knew my soon-to-be ex-wife. He seemed confused at first when I showed him a picture. He actually recognized her and told me he had met her during a work conference 8 years ago. I asked him if he slept with her then, and he actually told me right then and there that they did. He seemed to understand where this was headed and asked me who I was not going to lie. There were numerous instances where I wanted to punch his lights out, but I had to keep my cool. I couldn't afford to get any spots on my record, and an assault charge would have put me out of a job. We sat down on a park bench and swapped stories. When he found out that the twins were likely his, he was shell-shocked. He got on his knees and begged me to give him a chance to get to know them. To be a father, he said. I told someone here that I had never seen a man as distraught as him until I looked in the mirror, after the confrontation. At the moment, I have no reason to distrust him. He's been more open than she has been. Nevertheless, I won't allow him to meet the twins without a professional to mediate. I had to call him to inform him of that. I told him it was to protect the mental health of the twins, to which he agreed. Now, I'm just waiting for the legal side of things to work its course. I was told by the attorney I interviewed that I needed some documents that I had left back home. I'm not looking forward to that now for the top comments. I'm speechless, OP. Not only did she cheat on you, she cheated her kid's biological father of the chance to actually being their father. I don't know if people will say you should try to be in the kids' lives, but nobody will fault you for not wanting to. You're in an extremely sick situation, and your wife is an evil and vile person for what she did to you. All I can say is, I hope you the best. Stay strong, man. I will. This is just so unreal to me. Perhaps at the end of the road, I'll come out of this with some backbone. I just hope I can make it there. You really need to tell her parents that you are divorcing her, and the reason why her mother may side with her. But I guarantee you her father will understand. They will still be on her side as she is their daughter. But you have too much history with them to not give them a reason. Also, get a true paternity test done to be sure and get an STD test done as well. Your daughters are too young to understand all this, so please think about that when you decide how to tell them. Their world is blowing up and they don't know why. Can you have someone else go get the documents? I would very highly suggest you avoid communicating with your setbacks in any capacity. You never know how she would react if you were to go over there. The situation could turn volatile real quick. In situations like that, usually don't end up well for the man. If cops get involved, if you have no choice but to go yourself, then you need to take a witness with you in case you're set back. CW tries to do something crazy, which is very likely. Her life as she knew it is crumbling around her too, and she'll probably try anything in her power to either save the relationship or save face with family and friends. Good luck, man. I will have to go with a witness. My STB-SW would most likely refuse to allow anyone else to get those documents and even call the police have pushed hard enough now for the first update. It's been nearly 2 weeks since I made my first post. I had hoped I could do more during that time frame, but life tends to mess with you. First things first. I had to go back to my home to pick up some documents as people advised. I had an officer escort me and also kept a voice recorder at the ready where I live. There is no need for both sides to consent to being recorded, so it was perfectly legal. I went back about 5 days ago after talking to my attorney and counseling from my therapist. When I got there, I couldn't see her car in the driveway, nor could I tell if she was still home. It brought me comfort seeing that I wouldn't have to interact with her yet. What made my blood boil, however, was opening my door and seeing the twins in the hallway crying when they saw me. The twins rushed to hug me. While that wasn't unusual, the urgency that they did it with made me worry about what could have happened. Perhaps this was me trying to distract myself from the pain I felt when I looked at them. But I zeroed in on why they were so upset at seeing me. They told me that mom just left and that she was mad at them, that she kept crying all the time and that she would scream at them whenever they asked about me. They thought I had run away and that I was never coming back. One of them literally pulled me to the kitchen and pointed at the floor, saying that mom shattered a glass there while shouting at them and that the shards hurt them while they were trying to inform me of all this. I could feel my heart splitting in two. Half of me wanted to flee from the scene with them and protect them, while the other was worried about how the setbacks W could twist this to make her a victim. There was no visible signs of abuse, but I'm worried about what it could escalate to. There was no doubt in my mind that she had been drinking heavily. She has had a history of alcoholism. Her family is big on drinking. I haven't seen her drink since we were engaged, and it's possible she relapsed. I only had a handful of minutes left to collect my documents, so I told the twins that I had to rush back to work and told them that I loved them. I contacted their mother right after and told her that I wanted the twins to stay with me a while. Her voice was extremely slurred, so I knew she was drunk already. At 3 in the afternoon, she basically began bawling and apologizing for everything she had done, that she was a horrible person without me, and that she made a terrible mistake for cheating on the perfect husband. I told her that until she could get a handle on her drinking, she had to let the twins be with me. It took a while, but I was able to convince her that the twins were better off being with me for now. So the next day, I went back to my old home with the friend who housed me. God knows how, but she made it back there yesterday and handed me the twins, and kept telling me how the twins missed me and to give her a date for when I was coming back home. I know she was betting on the twins to lure me back in. She is unaware I already found their father and began filing for a divorce. Now they're here with me, and the mom isn't aware of that. I had continued reading the responses to my older posts, and people pointed out that the agreeable nature of our meeting was strange and concerning. I was too blinded by the relief I felt at finding an agreeable person to notice. Now that I did, I looked into the National Sex Offender Registry and he wasn't there, thank God. I looked even deeper into his social media and looking for anything that stuck out and found comments from 2 years ago mentioning that he was engaged to someone, seeing no post of him with a woman or man in a romantic light. I can only assume that relationship fell apart. That was the end of my findings. I contacted him and told him that if he truly wanted to become a father, we needed complete transparency between each other. I told him that I knew nothing about his past and what kind of romantic relationships he is prone to build. I needed to trust that he would be good to the twins and that whatever future partner he may have will be the same. I offered to do the same if he wanted me to, but he refused. He would do it if it was what I needed. I know polygraph results aren't always accurate, but it was the only thing I could think of at the time. The most reasonable theory I have is that the reason for his engagement breaking down was the same reason he was so driven to take the role as father, perhaps a miscarriage or something. We'll take that test later this week. I assume I can pick what questions he had to answer, but if that's wrong, please let me know. Beyond that, my STD test came back clean. I'm okay. Seeing the twins all the time now hurts. Hearing them call me dad feels like a stab in the chest each time, and hugging them makes me feel like a criminal, but I'm dealing with it. I'll try to keep recording all our interactions so that the setbacks. You can't accuse me of anything, and I have plenty of recordings that she won't like getting out. Needless to say, I've also had a paternity test done, and it's official. I'm not their father. God, it fucking hurts. Now for the top comments. Dude, I am so sorry that you find yourself in this situation. But on one level, there's a story I read today about a man who divorced his wife after raising 2 girls, and the wife had the gall to tell him he was not the father of the youngest one to rub it in his face. While this is tragic and so hurtful, one day you will be able to find a relationship in which you can truly own your soon-to-be ex is a train wreck. But she must now live with her deceit. Please keep us apprised of your future happiness. I don't know what I would have done in that man's shoes. I'll try to keep you all aware of what's going on. When you came home and the kids were crying and alone, that was the time to get the police involved. That's child abuse, plain and simple. Opie, you are not their biological dad, but you've been their father. At least this little bit of truth is exposed to you. I'd be selective about using it with her. As it's a one-time use thing, I'd take some time to reflect before you decide what to do next, regardless of what you decide. She's the one that created this mess, not you. Get out of the situation and sue her for paternity fraud. It takes more than biology to be daddy. It hurts like hell when you find out. I know from firsthand experience you can still be the best dad to those kids if you want to. Just don't fall for any of the setbacks. BS and manipulation. Handle her like you would have. Venomous snake. Now for the second update. Also, I moved out of my friend's place and got a place to rent. It was difficult, but the owner was helpful by recommending me to a friend of his looking to rent out a place. I felt that it would be safer for them to have their own room, and I'm tired of sleeping on a couch. The polygraph was insightful. Dom was who he said he was, which was a relief. He had no knowledge of my setbacks, W's marital status, and genuinely wants to be in the twins' lives. His motivation wasn't as intense as I assumed. He just really wanted to be a dad. And none of his previous relationships panned out. I had heard from my setbacks W's sister that she was checked into a rehab center and began the process to recovery. At least it would make serving her papers a lot more simple. However, the main issue was the fact that the twins definitely overheard I'm not their father during their time with their mother. I knew they were acting strange since I took them with me. They clung to me far more intensely than normal, asking me worrying questions like if they were adopted or whether I was going to run away again. I had chalked it up to what they had gone through while they were with their mother, due to how difficult it was to get them to talk about it. They would just ask the question and run away once I answered, only to return and demand. I let them sit on my lap to watch me work or to play with them. I would try discussing what their feelings were like, only for them to shut down and then flee. At that point, I had set up an appointment for a therapist to see them. I guess at some point they couldn't handle it, and one of them came to me sobbing while I was asleep and just hugged me. Sherry, false name for convenience, was the one who clung to me the most during this period, which concerned me. Even before that point, she was the type who disliked physical contact with a passion. Words were flying out of her mouth, but they were too fast and out of order for me to understand. It took an hour before I even got her to calm down enough to be understandable, and even then it was up to me to make it make sense. But here's the gist of it. None of this are actual statements, and a lot of it is from my observation, assumptions, and piecing together broken statements. During my absence, their mother took to heavily drinking at night and would be inexplicably absent. She's the kind of drunk who talks loud, and that was the case when Sherry went down one night to watch her. Well, if I was correct in my assumption, This was around the time I texted her that I knew the twins weren't mine and she must have gone ballistic. Sherry told me that their mother was yelling that I should have been able to love them as if they were mine and not to run away. So me coming back, that must have made them think all of that wasn't true. My behavior during their time with me, however, must have made them concerned. They noticed the drop in my gestures of affection. They wanted more hugs, more laps, sitting, more piggyback rides, and so on. But I simply couldn't do it as much as I used to. I try, I really do. But I can't stop feeling like I shouldn't do those. I've talked to my therapist about it, and she's told me that's common for men struggling with paternity. Only time will tell what I can and can no longer do. My original plan of breaking it to them slowly with a professional at the ready is completely in the gutter. Now I'm playing cleanup. They have had their first in-person therapy session about 3 days ago and 2 online sessions before that. So far, no mention of me not being the father has been brought up. We've mostly been focusing on what they had seen and how that made them feel. I can't go into much detail here. The post would go on for too long. So that's my situation right now. It's been a month since I first discovered everything, and I can't believe so much has happened in so little time. I've had divorce papers ready for a week now, and just need to decide whether I'll still be financially responsible for the twins or whether that will be the biological parents. Should I decide not to be? I'll need to make a petition to take me off the birth certificate, which then automatically means I will have no grounds to fight for custody. I won't deny that I want a family with my blood, and I want to be able to fully support them without having to pay child support to my setbacks. W. In the end, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. I'll have to sacrifice so much for either option, and there's no clear right thing to do. I must either sacrifice a chance to have children of my own, or sacrifice the twins that I've raised and loved for 8 years. Most of you must be baffled by this, but it's actually suffocating for me. Each passing second is like a noose that gets tighter and tighter. Now for the top comments. Some people here seem to be pretty naive. You're right to not want to pay child support. Trust me. Most women are not looking to get hitched and start a family with a man who is paying child support for 2 kids, let alone kids that aren't his. Oh, by the way, paying alimony to an ex-wife who defrauded him about the paternity of those kids. Do whatever you need to do to get that woman completely off your back and out of your life. Your desire to have biological children is completely legitimate. Do what you need to do to facilitate that goal becoming reality, Opie. There's no way in hell your STB-RDW will ever co-parent with you. If you believe there is a way for you to get any form of custody here, you're being delusional. You're already vetting the bio dad to be able to step in the role of dad. Once that happens, your setback W will have to split time with this guy. You think she won't try to make your life a living hell for that, regardless of it being right or wrong? The good thing is how well you're working with the bio dad, as he seems like he takes your concerns seriously. Ally with him, as he will need your support throughout this. Perhaps your lawyer can represent him. This will be very important later. We all get it for you. Leaving the twins will hurt like hell. But again, think with your brain, not your heart. You are way beyond having a life bearing any resemblance of what you had 6 months ago. No matter what, your daughters have a shaky foundation as it is. Try and legally stay custody, and the courts could hook you with ridiculous child support and alimony payments that go to your wife. Despite this being her fault, she will resent you for these events and take your money hand over fist while trashing you to the twins. Smart play is to sever all legal and accountable ties as possible. Help Biodad establish his place in the twins' life. That way you move on with your life, yet still being able to know how the twins are doing when their mother trash talks you to them. You have someone who will correct the story and sing your praises. Good luck, OP. Now for the final update. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone for all the support and advice you've all given me. You've all saved my life in more ways than one. I apologize for not updating until now. I was advised by my therapist to avoid being influenced by too many other perspectives and opinions in order to faithfully discuss my own feelings and opinions with him. And so I did. I informed my therapist about making one final post, and he told me that while he advised against it, he couldn't decide that for me. So this may be my final post, at least until everything is truly said and done. My setbacks W had left the rehab center earlier than her caretakers advised. About 8 days after my last post, I had already had divorce papers ready for her to sign and had her served while her sister and she were at my old home. She called me and tried to plead with me not to go through with it, that this would tear the family apart. I couldn't stand it. I wish I could say I was calm and methodical in my response, but that would be a lie. I was vitriolic, resentful. I told her that the family was torn before it began, that she was a disgusting, slimy creature that couldn't even love her own kids. Right. That she was the lowest life forms I had the displeasure of ever knowing. I said a lot more than that. Those were the nicest things I mentioned. I could feel the shock she felt at all the hateful things I had said. I was lucky that I wasn't at my apartment when she called me. The twins were spared from seeing me lose control like that. Regardless the setbacks. I got the message that I was serious about divorce and pulled 80. Now she had sent me threatening messages, saying she'll take every penny I have. I had been filing every conversation and message I could get before blocking her, informing her that I would only contact her through my attorney. She hadn't mentioned or asked about the twins up to the day I blocked her, January 16th. And I have noted that the deadline is coming up, and she still hasn't responded in any legal capacity. The twins have been doing much better. They have been recovering from all the shock and upheavals that has been thrown their way since this is all began. It's clear that they haven't really processed that another man is their biological father, and their therapist has discussed with me that a lot more work had to be done before really tackling that issue. The way they learned their true parentage was one that could have serious repercussions, if not handled correctly. It is for that reason that I've decided to hold off any meeting between them in the home. The mom has let me know just how disappointed he was, but that he understood the reason behind it. He has actually began to pay me back for all the money I have spent on the twins' education. So far, he's paid me $6,524. The guy has been really trying to pay me back. I've kept records of his payments and haven't touched the money yet. I would rather put it into some kind of savings account for the twins and for myself. I've been doing much better mentally. I have continued to sketch and draw whenever I'm alone so that I don't let my mind wander too much. I've also rekindled my childhood love for gaming. Bought myself a piece for 2 weeks ago. PS5s are nowhere to be found these days and have been enjoying it ever since. The twins and I play together when we can, and it's helped ease the pain I felt when interacting with them. But it's clear every single one of us have been traumatized by my setbacks, whose actions I have been putting off any decisions about custody, at least until my therapist and I have the utmost confidence in my emotional stability. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer what I can. Now for the top comments. Dude, I admire you for your girls. You are the father. Don't forget you are the father. No other men will do what you did. If not, you love them like a father. Thank you. I'm doing my best to do right by the twins and myself. Her treatment of the kids during this and her not asking about them in your last call is disturbing. Seems like she sees it as being their fault. Sad? Yeah. I used to think the world of her. Now I can't recognize the person she's become. I'm so impressed with the way you have handled this most excruciatingly painful event a man could ever experience. After reading the painful details from your now dead marriage, I think that I'm going to finally spend the money and get an at-home paternal test myself. I've been talking myself out of it for months, but fear of the results is not a valid excuse. Thank you for sharing your strength. Godspeed, friend. Don't make the same mistake I did in telling my wife about the test. Regardless of what you discover, I'm here if you need me. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to this story. I hope you all enjoyed it. Like and subscribe to the channel to get notified when a new video drops. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.